Check two. Two. Hello. Hello. Fellow patriots, the deep state has me bogged down with schoolwork. But my gig at the college newspaper is going great. I have intel and I'm going to be a full-time basketball correspondent for the school. Going to be interviewing players and coaches. Coal mine, that's so cool. That's so cool. Congratulations to you. That's great. That's wonderful intel. That's wonderful intel. Happy to hear that. Coal mine. How's it going, everybody else? What's going on? Hello, everyone. What is up? There's an endless different variety of ways I can ask that same question. What's up? What's the haps? What about that? What if I started going with that? What's the haps, everybody? What's the buzz? That's right. There we go. I had to buy a new ring light because I clumsily broke my old one. I have a new one now. I'm trying to set that up. I guess that means someone's returning to streaming. That's good to know. That's good to know, Sean. I got a new light because in terms of like
count
my
on
desk
me,
space.
you're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
If you got a problem with Canada Gooses, you got a problem with me, and I suggest you let that one marinate. Leftoff 4 Ferta Leftoff 4 ONEPOG.
Stu, thank you very much. For the 20 months of Tier 1, thank you, Stu. I really appreciate all the support. Official TRRS correspondent, Left Hand Stu. Yes, this is a pay-to-play media operation. Yes, it is. What of it? What of it? New light, 33% more bisexual. Really,
you can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Risk Inverse, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you very much, Risk Inverse. Really, I got significantly more bisexual lighting today, just because a lot of the visibility of that depends on the natural light situation. In this place, in this office. Usually it's been very bright the last couple of days. Now today, very gray, very gloomy, very rainy. Not a lot of light coming in through the window. So you see now the much more prominent role of the bisexual lighting today. I had a frustrating morning. Ever since, I have this new modem, new situation, and I have a new, there was a Windows update, and I have, blazingly fast internet. Blazingly fast. But I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the new router. I don't know if it's the Windows update, but I'm plugged in with an Ethernet connection. The Ethernet goes from my computer into this little connection here. Then there's a wire that runs all the way into the other room where the router is, connecting it to the modem, the router. And when I turn my computer off, every single time my computer goes off, I turn it back on, and the Ethernet connection doesn't work. And I get this weird error message saying you're connected to the internet, but something. I did the troubleshooting. It says the Ethernet has an invalid IP something. How far from the router? It's just like a few meters away. It's just in the next room. Put it to sleep instead of off. But that seems to have the same thing. And then every time I turn the computer back on, it's like a different fix. Sometimes I just need to unplug the cable and plug it back in a few moments later, and it works. Sometimes I do it and it doesn't work. Sometimes I have to reset the whole network adapter, and that works. Today I tried doing that twice and it didn't work. And literally I just have to keep unplugging it and plugging it back in, unplugging it and plugging it back in, and eventually it just connects. Set a static IP address. Okay, so I want to change it from an automatic IP. It could be Havana syndrome. That's right, Dan. It could be. That could be it. Sometimes the CIA is all up in your internet. I mean, I think in this case it would be CSIS, but the CIA would be working through CSIS in this case. So I need to set a static IP address. I'm not totally sure how to do that. But it's just really strange. Like sometimes I can fix it right away. Sometimes I fix it right away. I just unplug the thing, plug it back in, and it works. Today I spent like a fucking hour trying to get the shit to work again. I spent my whole morning just like unplugging, plugging back in, resetting the router, turning my computer on and off. And then eventually I just unplugged it again for like the 5th time and plugged it back in, and it worked. Need a Huawei router. Static IP address would be a setting on your router. This is another thing is I have like the admin password to get into the router and like change all that stuff, and I have no idea how to do it. Trudeau is making sure you're not talking to the truckers. That's it. That's right. I thought you had a blazer on. No blazer today. You see, when I type that in, 127.0.0.1, it says that site cannot be reached. $5G, there's the problem. So this is really annoying because sometimes it's an easy fix. Sometimes it's an easy fix, and sometimes it takes me like fucking 90 minutes to figure out how to get the internet to work again. And it's literally like I just had to unplug it over and over and over again. After like the 5th time that I just unplugged the Ethernet and plugged it back in, then it worked. Very strange. Very fucking annoying, too. Very annoying, because otherwise the internet connection is really good. Get your old VCR out and beat it with the hammer. The router will fall in line. That's good. You got to show it who's boss. Your router IP is usually written on the router. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't know. We don't need to do tech support. I appreciate everyone trying to help me with this. I don't think it's very engaging or interesting content for us to do tech support. To troubleshoot my internet connectivity issues. Oh, there's the network. Okay, that's good. Okay, we got that. Okay. I got in. I'm in. I'm in, folks. I'm in. I got into my network settings. I'll figure it out. We love tech talk. Everyone loves this. Everyone loves this when I'm clicking around on settings and you can't see what I'm looking at. Check this shit out, though, okay? Check this shit out, okay? You want to see some blazingly fast internet? Try this on for size. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go. Look at that. When it works quite well. Not even a gig. It was actually seems faster when I check it on my phone, it seems faster. Which doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. When I'm plugged in with Ethernet. It's not that fast. Wow. Okay. Okay. Can't impress you guys. No impressing the chat. Every single thing that I try to show them, they're just like, whatever, I don't care. That's not cool. My internet's faster. Lucky you in your civilized part of the country. It's actually not very civilized. Anyway, I do have access to my router now. Advanced tools and settings. Okay, that requires the password, which I do have. But I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to go into my router settings right now and fix stuff. Your internet is faster, but do you have any games on your phone? I got a couple. I don't really need any fast internet for Spell Tower, though. I've been playing a lot of Spell Tower. After the recommendation from community member G. Kleppy, I got Spell Tower. I've been playing that. We always start these things the same way. Rob, are you a gamer? As you all know that I am. You all know that I clearly am. You should learn magic. Do you mean like actual magic or like Magic the Gathering? Should I learn actual magic? I can do some coin magic. What about this? What do we think about this? This never fails to impress little kids. If you ever want to impress a little kid, you're just like, hey, are you watching this? Look very closely. Look at this coin. I'm going to take it right here in my hand. Look at that. Gone. It's gone. And then you can make it appear in different places. The ear is obviously one of the ones I go with most often. You make it reappear in the ear. My kid loves this. He fucking loves this. Because then I do that and he immediately covers his ears like that. And he thinks he can block it. It's a little bit less impressive when you do the move off camera. It's difficult because of the spacing, metal dipshit. Look, okay? I try it one more time. Look, first of all, I made it reappear. Ta-da. And here you go. Take it like that. How about this one? Okay? How about this one? People love this one as well. Okay? So first of all, back in my hand. Okay? Ready for this? Little known fact. Okay? Little known fact. You take some of these coins and you think it's silver, right? You think it's silver. But if you rub the coin into your arm like so, right? Damn it. Okay. Oh, the pressure's on, and I don't have a lot of room to work with here. Okay? So here's it is again. Here's the coin, right? I'm going to take it in my hand like this. Now, some people think that the coin is silver, but what it really is it's painted silver. It's silver paint on it, okay? So you take it like this. You take the coin like this. You rub it into your arm like this. And the sweat molecules in your arm, they interact with the coin, okay? They melt the coin away. It dissolves the coin. You can actually dissolve it right into your skin. You take it and just keep rubbing it into your arm like this. And it's the sweat compounds in your arm interacts with the coin, right? And it dissolves it away. And if you rub it enough, it just disappears, right? If you rub it into your arm enough, the coin just disappears. But I know what you're thinking, right? I know what you're thinking. What's that? What's going on in here? What's going on in here, right? Surely it's there, right? Surely the coin is still there. Isn't that right? Well, what about this, though? What about that? What do we think about that? So, you know, you do that for a little kid and they love it. Just check behind my ears. It's not there. It's not there. No. It's not behind your ear. If you were here, then it would be there. No, it just disappeared into another dimension. Yeah, look in your pocket right now. Look in your pocket right now, and I think you'll find something that wasn't there previously. Are you hit at children's birthday parties? Yes. Yes, I am actually. Yeah, but I think, and look at this. I'm going to go, I think chat, I see something here. I think I see something. It's right through here. If I can just reach in, grab that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There it was. It's the queen. The queen. You better memorize that. Memorize that. We're not going to be seeing that lady on our money anymore. So there we go. There we go. How did I have Canadian money? Exactly. Anyway, this is going to be the stream today. We're mostly doing this. Those are the only two tricks I know, by the way. There's the make coin disappear. That's one, and then the arm thing is like a subsect of that. It's an offshoot of that. Rob does better tricks with money than Biden does with loan forgiveness. Oh, hey-oh. There we go. There we go. Anyway, I think that's the end of the stream for today. I don't think we're going anywhere but down after that. I don't think we're going to... There's nowhere to move on from this. I know you saw in the pre-show, we won the drug war. That's it. It's over. It's over. We won. We did it. We did it, Joe. All you negative Nancys, all you Debbie Downers were criticizing Dark Brandon. No. It's time to everyone post unironic Dark Brandon memes. The drug war's over. Joe Biden's looking around saying, I can't believe there's people going to jail for marijuana. It's like, yeah, I can't believe that, Joe. How could this ever have happened? Who are the people that made these rules? Let's find them and do something to them. We're all looking for the guy who did this. We're all looking for the guy that implemented these tough on crime drug war laws. As soon as we find this guy, he's gonna get a real stern talking to over this. The show is not really over. No, it's not. It's not. I've got to stay and make line go up a little bit. I feel a little sick, And I don't think I can improve upon doing magic tricks at the beginning of the stream, but duty calls. Duty calls. It's my first almost full week. It was almost a full week of the Rob Rousseau show. It feels even weird to say the Rob Rousseau show. That's not. It's just TRRS. Like, it's not even a fucking acronym anymore. Magic always makes me feel sick too, messing with that kind of power. I know. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. After whatever bullshit segment this is, though, I do want to talk a little bit about how the West weaponizes human rights complaints. I don't have a lot prepared on this, but I think there's enough that we can get into a couple things about this subject. Pivot to Magic the Gathering streamer. Well, my friend Jordan Yule would love that. This guy loves Magic. Because I edit the Insurgents podcast, right? And I literally, there's multiple episodes where I've got to edit out like 5-10 minutes of Magic the Gathering talk. Because I think Jordan is just drawing on his like pool of like fellow Magic heads to bring on as guests. And then inevitably they get into discussion about this at the beginning. And I'm just like, we can't have 15 minutes of like intense Magic the Gathering talk on our political podcast. Like, we can't do it. Do you ever talk about the big news of the Try Guys? I'm really torn up over it. I'm just convinced that whole thing is like a PR thing. I don't know. I think it's just a big... Because I've never heard of these guys previously, and then it's like there's been like numerous front page stories on like a variety of serious newspapers and magazines over the last like 2 weeks about this, and it seems really strange to me. I think the whole thing was cooked up by some like fucking evil, demonic PR agency. Unfortunately, Dan, we cannot talk about the 70s jazz rock band that you're referencing. Unfortunately, we can't. I would like to. Obviously, it's one of my favorite subjects to discuss, but there is a certain rules and regulations that have been put in place about this. So if you do want to talk about that, please just join the Discord server. You can join the Dan Ban channel or thread on the Discord server, and we'd be happy. We can talk about albums like Asia, Gaucho. Whatever you like. And in fact, also speaking of the Discord server, I was happy to start a new thread about about dragon bullshit. As you all know, I'm heavily back into the dragon bullshit, and I've been enjoying discussing that. And now there's a place in the Discord server to talk about the dragon bullshit, and we can share memes, theories. We could talk about the House of the Dragon series or whatever else. I did start watching Dakadoon. You got to get into it. I know some of you are scared of being hurt again, all right? I know some of you are scared of being hurt again. I understand. It's not going to be like that this time, though, okay? It's not going to be like that this time. This time it's different. This time it's going to be different. Okay? It's not going to be like that this time. I did start watching Rings of Power as well. I started watching that with my partner, which I'm trying to get into. I'm trying to give it a chance. It looks great. It really looks like they spent $1 billion on it because they did. It looks fantastic. It's not quite gripping me in the same way. It's not tickling those same pleasure centers to the same extent. I need the fucked up politics and the weird shit going on. Andor is very good. We've talked about Andor as well. I've been highly enjoying that. And I don't know if because like when it comes to House of the Dragon, there's this whole like fandom that's built up around the different factions in this Targaryen civil war. You have the Greens versus the Blacks, and then you have people kind of taking a side on these. And the people that support the Greens are kind of all in on that, and the people that support the Blacks are all in on the other side. The Blacks being, of course, Rhaenyra and Daemon. The Greens being Alicent, Otto Hightower, their kids, Aegon and is it Aemond? Aemond? And for me, I don't have a huge amount of like stakes in either side. I think naturally I'm being drawn to the Blacks because listen, folks, here's the fact that people don't want to recognize. This is not what's people don't want to acknowledge this. Here's the reality. King Viserys clearly named Rhaenyra his heir. She's the heir to the Iron Throne. Viserys made this very clear. And whatever, but he should have done this. He should have waited. He has another firstborn son now. He should name Aegon. Regardless, he made Rhaenyra the heir. She's the heir to the Iron Throne. And that's just the end of the story. I don't support everything that this faction does. Daemon, of course, has done some very fucked up shit so far, and probably will continue to. The reality is, Viserys named Rhaenyra to the heir to the Iron Throne. Case closed. She's the heir. End of story. Does this all lead up to the Dance of Dragons? Yeah, this is all kicking off. This is kicking off. All of season 1 is just basically setting the stage for the shit to hit the fan. Dakadoon, you should get back into it. Come on. It's good. I'm telling you, it's good. I'm telling you. And even things that are not that good, you can make fun of it. It's okay. Come on, Dakadoon. I know I'm selling you on this. Dakadoon's breaking. He's cracking. Lode, not you too. Not you too. Listen, the reality is that Rhaenyra is the heir to the Iron Throne. That's just the way she goes. I woke up today and my throat was feeling a little bit better, but I'm talking and it's starting to get kind of sore. I think since we're talking to talk about human rights today and how the West and how the United States and Canada as well weaponizes human rights to further their own geopolitical goals. I think today watching this Brian Becker and Ben Norton video from Breakthrough News, 251 interventions in 30 years, would probably be a good way to get into that discussion. Because like when we're talking about America lecturing China or Russia or North Korea or whoever about human rights, with their atrocious record of completely flagrantly violating millions of people's human rights around the world, it's important to have a real firm grip on that so you can understand the level of hypocrisy when they wag their finger, right? VJ loves to talk about this. VJ Prashad loves to talk about this. They wag their finger at other countries, but I think if we understand, if we really do have a firm grip on the level of flagrant violations of people's human rights that the United States has been part of for hundreds of years, it helps us, I think, understand that these accusations are more often than not total bullshit. It is fucking irritating, HTA. Like, it's irritating to us, and I imagine especially it's very irritating to the people in these developing countries. Like when, like, fucking Cuba, when America lectures human rights about lectures Cuba about human rights. And then they must just be like, are you fucking kidding me? Or people in Vietnam or Korea or whatever, lecturing people in Korea about human rights. The United States lecturing people in Korea, a country where they killed 3 million people. They killed 3 million people in Korea. And they're going to sit around and wag their finger at Koreans and criticize their human rights record. Like, it's truly just astounding. Yeah, they just had the Uyghur vote yesterday, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. But perhaps we can watch that breakthrough news video first. By the way, speaking of Vietnam, I don't want to get into streamer drama. I think you all know that I try to avoid talking about streamer drama. But friend of the stream, Luna Oi, is someone that I really like and respect a lot, the work that she does, talking about Vietnam and talking about socialism in Vietnam and educating people about Marxism, Leninism. Nothing but respect for Luna Oi. And I think people that are like, anyone that's going to sit around and target Luna as a kind of like clickbaity drama video, I think is fucking not cool. You know? And I certainly have sympathy for certain individuals who, are doing what I think are positive things, standing up for the trans community when the trans community is under this historic, like, assault. And of course, I don't support or going after these hives of fucking weird online fascists, like in Kiwi Farms, or these weird reactionaries online and embarrassing and humiliating them. I think that's like, I have support for that. I certainly don't think anyone should be doxxed or threatened with the police violence or swatting or any of that stuff for engaging in that kind of like trans advocacy. But the anti-communism is not cool. Going after Luna Oi is not fucking cool either. And this will be the first and last time I will mention this, but I just wanted to mention that I do really appreciate the work that Luna Oi does. And friend of the stream, Luna Oi, had a great conversation with her last year, hoping to have her come back sometime soon to talk to us. You should invite Luna on the show. Well, she's been on before. We had a great appearance with she did a great appearance on this show last year. But yeah, I will again. Yeah, I will again, Mustache Imperial. I'd be happy to have her again sometime. Anyway, that's all I wanted to mention about that. The Friends of Voosh Brainworms. You hate to see it. You really hate to see it. Very unfortunate stuff. Famous TRRS chatter, Voosh. What was it? What a weird day that was on the stream, wasn't it? Full support for Luna Oi against all reactionary attacks. I couldn't agree more, Sam. Why is Luna Oi such an accurate litmus test for whether someone sucks? How can you watch Luna Oi and attack her? She's literally just making educational vids. And just it seems like a very nice person, like a nice and kind person. You know? And it's weird. It's just it's clickbaity drama bullshit, which I really can't stand. So that's all I wanted to talk about that. That's all. That's all. You know, you folks know that I really try to avoid the drama and all that stuff. Vooch is a blithering moron. He's just like the Chuds. No ethics, no greater ideology or politics. He just wants to make people mad. I mean, that seems to be an animating force in a lot of the commentary that he does. It's just like, is this going to make people really mad at me? And is this going to make me trend by pissing off a bunch of people, regardless of how like informed my opinion is, or like, you know, that seems to be the primary motivator for a lot of his beliefs, which is kind of inherently kind of reactionary, isn't it? I don't remember the name of the person who started the thing with the green lines where bending over Benedict makes a bendy line, which is bad. I'm not sure who that was, but that's very enjoyable though. I always enjoy that one. No, you explained it perfectly. Voosh and the people who want to pander to his audience are inclined to the algorithm, and that's it. Luna's hot in the algo right now because of the video she and EJ made criticizing MAGA communism, so some read it as the time to strike, I suppose. And I think from what I understand, this video that I'm referencing barely even mentions Luna. So it just seems like what you're saying, Husker, is just a pure attempt to like glom onto that by putting her in the image in the like the screen grab or whatever, and putting her in the title and just glomming onto fucking algorithmic bullshit. I don't know. It's just it's like the thing that I find least interesting about doing any of this kind of stuff. It's one thing that while doing that is probably great for your numbers and your metrics and your donations and growing your audience, it's just not something that I've ever had any interest in doing. Yeah, the video is most about MLs in CPC Canada. Yeah, that's was what I was understanding. Is this the drama report portion of the stream? It isn't, Starlight. It isn't. And I explicitly pointed out how I don't enjoy participating in any of this kind of streamer drama bullshit. I don't find it interesting. I don't find it enjoyable to talk about. But I did see that though that was going on, and I just found it lame. That was all. Kind of quite lame. It's not a beef. No, it's not a beef. It's not a beef update. Not true. Not true at all. Anyway, I want to talk about this Uyghur vote in the UN, the way that the West weaponizes human rights complaints, but I also want to rest my voice for a little tiny bit.
Cool, basically.
So what I would like to do now is watch this video featuring friend of the stream, Ben Norden, and hopefully one day friend of the stream, Brian Becker, someone who I think has done a lot of really great work over the last year. Certainly has helped me a lot, understanding and contextualizing the conflict in Ukraine and understanding like the non-NATO viewpoint of that. So let's watch this video with Ben and Brian, two faves, 251 interventions in 30 years, a system addicted to war. I'll just go with this as the title. Is this how you spell this? When I started to type this, I was like, oh shit. This is how you spell this, right? And obviously I know how to spell the word hypocrisy. I know. This is a test for you, chat. This is a test for you to see if you know how it's spelled. Obviously I know. Clearly. I'm a professional broadcaster, a professional journalist. I have an English major, degree in English literature. Obviously, I know how to spell that word, but this is for you. This is a test for you. Okay, good. You're right. You're correct, chat. You passed the test. Let's get to this video with Ben Norden and Brian Becker, and then we can talk a little bit about this Uyghur vote at the UN and how the West weaponizes human rights complaints and how there's a different sort of situation now where they're not able to carry out the same playbook in the same way that they used to. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with that. Here we go. And I just have to go blow my nose. One sec.
He says, I'll read the headline to you. It says, U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into giant weapon depot. Okay, everybody, U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into giant weapons depot. You know what I love about this headline? Is it's honest. It's one of those rare moments where whoever wrote the headline will probably be fired or laid off. We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago, but is not only realizable, but an imperative necessity. Today we are talking about the U.S. war machine, the U.S. warfare state. When he became president of the United States, Ronald Reagan said he was going to get rid of the U.S. welfare state. Well, it wasn't a welfare state. It wasn't a welfare state then. It's not a welfare state now. The U.S. is, in fact, a warfare state. Welcome to this week's episode of the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today we are talking with investigative journalist Ben Norton. He is with the website multipolarista.com. He has written a recent article on U.S. military interventions all around the world starting in 1798. Ben Norton, welcome back to the Socialist Program.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's one of my favorite shows, so it's always a real pleasure being here.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. It's a great honor for us to have you. Ben, I want to start. This is an incredible article that you have written, and it's on your website, multipolarista.com. The headline is very straightforward. U.S. launched 251 military interventions, not since 1798, but since 1991, and 469 since 1798. Now, many people hearing these numbers will say, wait a second, the Socialist Program or Ben Norton, somebody here is making these numbers up. But the numbers don't come from you. They don't come from Multipolarista. They don't come from the Socialist Program. They don't come from Breakthrough News. These numbers about U.S. military intervention come from the U.S. government.
Yeah, absolutely. They come from the Congressional Research Office, which is the research arm of the Congress. So they're effectively U.S. government employees. And every year they update actually a list of what they call the instances of use of United States armed forces abroad. And in March of this year, they did the most recent update. And if you look, especially what interested me is the number of interventions since 1991, the end of the first Cold War. We see 251 listings. Now, those are only the listings that are officially acknowledged by the Congressional Research Service. And this does not include covert operations by military services and intelligence agencies that are not publicly disclosed. It does not include the U.S. government's involvement in regime change operations, in coups. We're only talking about the publicly acknowledged official military deployment of U.S. forces abroad. So this, for instance, thanks to reporting by people like Nick TRRS, that the U.S. has special operations forces in dozens of countries around the world, including half of the African continent. We know that the U.S. has been involved in organizing coups and covert operations around the world. If we were to add those, I mean, of course, people like William Bloom in his book Killing Hope tried to take a journalistic stab at documenting that. I mean, we're talking about hundreds more. So I need to emphasize that this actually is a conservative estimate. And even this conservative estimate shows a really important fact to keep in mind, that after the end of the first Cold War, when the United States, which was leading the capitalist bloc in this global class war between socialism and capitalism, after the U.S. empire was able to overthrow the Soviet-led socialist bloc, the number of interventions abroad increased significantly. It did not decrease. So the very concept that the United States had, that it was supposedly intervening abroad to defend democracy and human rights against the so-called communist threat. Well, the so-called communist threat no longer existed after 1991, and the number of interventions increased. So clearly that pretense was completely false from the beginning.
Very important. Again, in modern times, Ben, when powers, governments go to war, They have to assign a noble cause to the war effort. It's not like the good old days when you could just go to war and the population were subject people. They were the subjects of the kings and queens. They were not the citizens. They didn't have rights. Public opinion didn't mean very much, say, in 17th century Europe. Maybe it meant something, but certainly today in the modern era, public opinion does matter. The people have the capacity to make revolution. They have the capacity, as they did during the Vietnam War, to, through their uprising against the war, become a material factor in the military calculations. I mean, I'm thinking about Vietnam, for instance.
Vietnam is such an interesting example too, because like, watching MASH is a good reflection of this. MASH took place during the Korean War, but it was really about Vietnam. And it was only a story that could have been told on this mainstream level because like public opinion about U.S. militarism and U.S. military interventions was at this all-time low. And it's really amazing. Excuse me. It's really amazing watching a lot of the media from that time that was so critical of U.S. militarism, the U.S. military, the CIA, the intelligence community. The 70s was like a golden age for a lot of really great storytelling about this. And you compare that to now. Like you compare the idea that someone could make MASH now. That's something that was really openly critical of the U.S. military, that featured people that are heroes and protagonists that are insubordinate at pricks to their commanding officers, that don't support the war. It's really amazing to think about like the MCU, for example, now in popular culture now, and how we've gone back to fetishizing the military and fetishizing the CIA and the FBI and the intelligence community. It's such a huge shift. And you see as well, like in the 70s, when we know the CIA got directly involved in Hollywood and in funding all these films going into like the Reagan era and beyond. It's just this night and day shift. Like we've gone backwards. We've gone fucking backwards from where we were culturally in the 70s, when it was totally okay and acceptable to criticize the U.S. military, to criticize the troops, to criticize the CIA. This was part of popular culture to be able to do this. And we've literally gone backwards. Like now we've got this nonstop stream of just uncritical propaganda. Or if you get into any kind of criticism about militarism or the security state, it's always this idea, well, there's bad people that are involved in it. There's bad people. There's the people, overall, the system is good. The institutions are good, but there's these bad people. There's bad actors that are involved. And all we need to do is get rid of these bad actors. And then the good people that are in the CIA and the FBI that have good values, want to do good things, they'll be empowered to, take over these institutions, do good things. And the idea that these institutions themselves are just totally corrupt and irredeemable, this is not part of our culture. It's absolutely not part of it. It's not acceptable to ever mention this. It's unthinkable to think about films or mainstream TV series or films that are coming out with these kind of criticisms. And that's, I think, really depressing, the way that we've gone backwards from the 1970s. And somehow a lot of the same boomers that protested the Vietnam War are now the first people. They're voting in CIA officers to fucking be in the Democratic Party. And they're on the front lines of saying, of course we need to ship billions of dollars worth of arms to Ukraine. Why wouldn't we? That's the noble, heroic thing to be doing, is turning Ukraine into this blood-soaked quagmire. Of course we need to do that. The very same people that protested the Vietnam War and that were critical of these establishments and these institutions in the past. It's actually very acceptable. You just spend too much time in spaces such as Twitch where it is not. I don't follow you. We don't see mainstream pop culture that is critical of the United States military or any of these intelligence institutions. Instead, we fetishize these things. You turn on your TV at night, every single fucking show is about cops, the CIA, the FBI, troops, and it's all just like fetishizing and glorifying these things. I don't totally know where you're coming from on that. It's depressing because we've gone backwards. God bless America and may God protect our troops. That's right, Jack. It's depressing because we've gone backwards culturally, you know? And now we just have this like defense industry funded media propaganda apparatus in both like Hollywood and the mainstream press that does nothing but manufacture consent for all of these institutions, these vile institutions. It's really depressing.
Richard Nixon said he had a special way of ending the war when he was elected in 1968, and he threatened nuclear annihilation to the Vietnamese negotiators, and the Vietnamese didn't blink, not only because they were confident in themselves, not only because they were confident on the battlefield or their forces on the battlefield in Vietnam, but because they knew that people in the United States would never, ever accept a nuclear attack against Vietnam, that in fact, there would have been a revolution in the United States.
Look what people are saying about Ukraine now. The idea that people are against, there would be a revolution or people were against using nukes in Vietnam. There's people on fucking Twitter right now that this very moment encouraging the U.S. to preemptively strike Russia to prevent them from using nukes in Ukraine. And there's just people openly advocating for nuclear Armageddon. And you know, the people that are against that are called tankies, right? The people that are saying, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we shouldn't be creating this proxy war fucking conflict and escalating it with these nonstop arms deals. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Now the people that make this argument are denounced and called tankies and called Putin apologists or whatever.
I mean, the people in the United States
Zelensky himself is doing
about Agent Orange. They did know about napalm. They were growing more and more intensely anti-war. But at a certain point, you know, Nixon and the Vietnamese knew was bluffing because of public opinion. So when we think about all of these military interventions in the modern era, they have to go for a good cause. They have to be done in a way to convince public opinion of their righteousness. And right now, the U.S. is
I'm not sure they've thought it through too much.
Weapons to Ukraine and in a proxy war that the U.S. is waging with Russia in Ukraine.
You're welcome, everyone, for like articulating exactly what this conversation is. Probably doing a lot better job at talking about interrupting these very intelligent, articulate people with my own interjections and just saying the things that they are also saying.
That has its own public rationale. So did the Vietnam War, the Korean War. But before 1991, it was always to defend democracy against communism. So that pretext went away. That's what you're saying with the collapse of the socialist camp. But the wars didn't go away. They just got new public rationales.
Well, and the number of those wars increased. So, of course, we all know that even the term Cold War is misleading in many ways. You've pointed this out, Brian, that for the people of Korea and Vietnam and Congo and so many countries in the global south, the Cold War was not cold. It was very hot. There were proxy wars. Certainly the people of Afghanistan in the 1980s, another proxy war that's kind of similar to the proxy war we see in Ukraine today. This new Cold War, the second Cold War, it's certainly hot for the people of Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians are dying, and they're being conscripted to go fight and die. It's very tragic. And yet we see Western governments refuse to go to the negotiating table because they have these maximalist demands. They can't give an inch. So we see that for people who are not in these global superpowers, the global superpowers treat people in other countries as collateral damage. And this is still the kind of attitude, mentality we see from top U.S. government officials. For instance, Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, who until he became defense secretary, let's not forget, was on the board of directors of Raytheon, the weapons corporation. He said the U.S. goal is to weaken Russia. We saw, for instance, Hal Brands, who is a neoconservative columnist and the Henry Kissinger Distinguished Professor at Johns Hopkins University.
Could we even have Cold Wars anymore with all this global warming? Well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing. Don Dirkstone is always 5 steps ahead.
He wrote an article in Bloomberg and the Washington Post in which he said that, NATO is waging a proxy war on Russia and we're fighting to the last Ukrainian. He said that pretty clearly. So we see this very flippant, imperial, arrogant attitude from some of these Western government officials. Hal Brands is a former Pentagon official, and sometimes we see people like Blinken will try to use more. The Secretary of State Antony Blinken will try to use more appealing PR rhetoric that makes it sound like they're doing this for democracy and human rights, but it's unfortunately this is the reality of imperialism, and we can see this thoroughly documented by the fact that the U.S. government has carried out 251 military
Cold War to fight global
abroad,
warming,
at least in a conservative estimate, since 1991.
Now we're talking.
Of course, we all know that the U.S. government's modus operandi, and this is the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which was leaked in the 1990s. It's full spectrum dominance. The Pentagon decided after overthrowing the socialist bloc that it could have a global spanning empire and that it could control pretty much every region of the world, and not just because it wants power. Imperialists don't just expand because they want power. They do it for economic reasons. U.S. corporations are the beneficiaries, not workers in the United States. It's Wall Street. They've made billions and trillions of dollars in this global spanning empire, extracting resources from the global south, super exploitation of cheap labor in the global south. We see these protests going on in Haiti, a country where we know that the U.S. government was actively lobbying to reduce the minimum wage. That's why the U.S. wants this global spanning empire to continue imposing these neoliberal economic policies around the world to extract wealth, to drain wealth away. And any countries that try to pursue a path of economic independent development, especially state-led economic development, is destroyed.
You know, Ben, I think either in your article, and again, the article is entitled U.S. Launched 251 Military Interventions Since 1991.
It's about money, you say?
469 since 1798. And people can get this at your website, multipolarista.com. It's either in that article or a YouTube video that you made about the article. So I'm not sure which it is. But
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious. Don Dark Zodi, thanks so much for the 5 gifted subs. It's about money indeed. And once again, I ask, who benefits? Who benefits from Don Dark Zoni being part of this community? Who benefits? Me. I do. And we all do. We all do. Mostly me. Mostly me, but others as well. Thank you, Don Dark Zodi.
The Economist, the British magazine, very establishment magazine, said that the United States spent more on military spending.
You can count on me.
That's
You're
in
going to have good old Rob to talk you through all
other countries
this.
In the world.
And thank you, Don Dark Zoni, again. Jeez, for another gifted sub. Wasn't content to let it sit at 555. Yes, Vijay Prashad wrote about Haiti last week. People that were demonstrating to increase the minimum wage to $5 per day, and the U.S. intervened to stop it. Yeah, and this is not new either. Like under the Hillary Clinton State Department, they did a coup in Haiti for the exact same reason, because they wanted to increase the minimum wage ever so slightly. And remember that VJ clip, right? About how these countries are exploited. It's not always about natural resources, you know? It's not always about that. Why does like Levi's or whoever have factories in Haiti? It's not because of like any special natural resources that they're getting there. It's because of the cheap labor, right? That's what this kind of global neoliberal dominance is about. Yes, they exploit the natural resources. Of course they do. Most countries are rich, etc. But it's not always about that. That's why IBM, that's why Levi's, that's why all these big, I don't know why those are the first two companies that pop in my mind, but that's why they go out into these developing countries. It's not always because of the natural resources, it's because of the labor. And when Haitians or anyone else starts to band together and says like, well, we should be paid a little bit more for working in these factories, the United States State Department goes in, overthrows the government to ensure that this doesn't fucking happen. And, you know, there's been ongoing protests in Haiti against this exact practice now for years, even despite doing another coup last year, which we covered on this stream. Do we hear about these protests? Do we hear about the Haitians crying out for freedom When you turn on CNN, when you turn on CBC, Fox News, MSNBC, no, you don't. You do hear about Iran, though. You hear about Iran. You hear when there's a couple of dozen Cubans that come together to do a protest. You hear all about that. But for some reason, you don't hear about Haiti to the same extent. We have to ask ourselves why that is.
Combined. Now, that's not the case now. That's not the case now. We want to talk about that and what's changed. But when you look at U.S. military spending compared, say, to China, I believe it's about 5 times greater each year, 5 times greater than China. When you look at what the Russians spend on military, on the Russian military, it's less than 10.
Hello, transgendal. Hello. Good morning. Yes, thank you, Sinchal. Hillary defeated the increase of the Haitian minimum wage to 61 cents from 24 cents. that she girl bossed her way to ensuring that Haitians couldn't be paid that slight increase in their wages. What the U.S. has done to Haiti, the first free state in the Caribbean, is a standout crime in a long list of horrific crimes committed by the U.S. And in many ways, Haiti's just still being punished for the fact that it was the first free state in the Caribbean. It was one of the first revolutionary slave societies. And it's still being punished to this day for this transgression. There was a protest in Lviv. Protesters want to know where their family members are that have been fighting in the military. You don't hear about that one either. No, you don't. No, you do not. Those are just are Russian-backed dissidents, though, so they don't count.
10% of what the U.S. spends every year on war. The U.S. is making a great big noise right now about the threat posed by North Korea because North Korea just launched a missile that went over Japan. The North Korean military budget is about $4 billion a year. The U.S. military budget is about almost $900 billion officially. Then when you add the other places where military spending takes place, but it's not in the Department of Defense budget, that number is really about $1 trillion. The North Korean military budget is $4 billion, which is the size of the New York City Police Department budget. So when you just look at the issues of military spending, it says so much about this characterization that we're using that we are in a warfare state. I mean, it really is a state premised on war. It's an empire, a global empire, different, say, than the British Empire, the French Empire, or the Spanish or Portuguese empires, which were based on, out-and-out colonies in different parts of what we now call the Third World. But it's an empire premised on military might and the extension of American military power everywhere, and on this unbelievable capacity to spend what appears to be limitless funds on military hardware.
Yeah, in the same way that Canada is like 3 mining companies in a trench coat. Obviously, there's a lot of natural resource exploitation going on with America as well. But it's basically an arms manufacturer masquerading as a country, right? Not a real country. It's just a big arms manufacturing corporation. Pissed. Don't do this. Don't do this. I corrected myself instantly. Come on, stop it. Stop this. When's Brian coming on the show? I gotta get Brian will come on. Okay, I will get Brian to come on the show. Love Brian Becker.
That's absolutely right. And you all at Breakthrough News published a very good speech by mutual friend Vijay Prashad, who pointed out a fact that I hadn't actually
my mutual friend as well.
Enough. The entire United Nations budget is around $3 billion. So that's to say that all the countries in the world, the 193 member states together combined, fund the United Nations to support peace, ostensibly, for $3 billion per year. The United States alone spends nearly $1 trillion on the books for war. This is not for peace, this is for war. So that really shows the striking double standard there and the lack of priority. I mean, it's disturbing, and especially considering the bipartisan U.S. government attacks on the United Nations as an institution.
I work in immigration and have Haitian clients. The amount of violence that takes place there is abhorrent and is wholly based on the economic situation that the US and French have imposed on them throughout history. The money that goes to the NGOs there is completely squandered and does very little to help the people there. Well, what do we say about NGOs and these kinds of institutions? It's when, what does the saying go? When the poor people of a rich country give their money to the rich people of a poor country. Something along those lines, I believe. And yeah, its history is like a classical Greek tragedy. It's true. Yeah, extensions of imperialism. Yeah.
Especially under Republicans, but even under Democrats, the attempt by the U.S. government to replace the international law-based order centered on the UN with the so-called rules-based international order in which Washington makes the rules and orders everyone around. It shows this, again, this very arrogant imperial attitude in which the U.S. ruling class truly sees the entire world as the kind of imperial property of the U.S., or a term that's becoming used now, the global Monroe Doctrine. Next year is the 200th anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. Well, that's the doctrine, that the colonial doctrine in which the United States declared Latin America to basically be its colonial backyard, or Joe Biden recently referred to Latin America as the U.S. front yard. I mean, it shows that regardless of who's in power, the U.S. president sees Latin America as the proverbial yard of the United States. But now we see a kind of global Monroe Doctrine. Every country is part of the U.S. backyard. The Pacific region on the other side of the planet, the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, it's all the U.S. backyard. But, there's another really important point I want to get at here, which is about the military-industrial complex. And Brian, you hit the nail on the head. We can't underestimate how important the war machine is for capitalism in the United States, for the economy to continue functioning as it is. And
that's why Russia banned the British they exist as cover for intelligence services. That's why Russia banned the British Council, which has pretty much always been a den of spies. And we're going to talk about the ways that like human rights NGOs advance imperialism as well. That's why we enjoy that Lukashenko video, right? When he talks about getting rid of all the real massacre, all the scum you have, or whatever he says. And getting rid of all these NGOs, because they know exactly what the role that these NGOs play. NGOs in Haiti have basically replaced its state functions. Yeah. Oh, you're upset. Yeah. Chad move. He sucks, but well done. He's a problematic fave. Yeah. Oh, you're upset. Oh, you're upset. A problematic fave, Lukashenko. He recently just banned inflation as well. He's just like, inflation is illegal. I'm making inflation illegal. And again, I know he's a very problematic figure, but I hear that and I'm like, that's what I've been saying. Someone should, like, you can do that. I've been saying this, right? You can back me up, Chad. I've been saying this. Just stop inflating it. Just say, like, stop doing this. Just stop doing inflation. He said, just don't let it inflate. I've been demanding people do this. Hello, Progressive Canuck. What's up? Doctors Without Borders, too. I mean, I'm not going to talk shit about Doctors Without Borders. I think, like, obviously they do a lot of really great work, but I think part of the problem is that, like, Doctors Without Borders becomes necessary in places that have been decimated by American militarism and Western imperialism. Like, infamously, the American war crime I talk about probably most often is when Obama was responsible for the brutal destruction and murder of a lot of doctors and nurses and patients at a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan. You know? I think the people that are involved in these NGOs, like Doctors Without Borders, are doing amazing work and are selfless people. But they still are, even as they're doing this great work, they're acting as an arm of American militarism. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in New York that are well aware. Yeah. And we just go 1 week without having to hand it to someone like Lukashenko. I mean, it speaks to how fucking bereft of any kind of quality leadership we have in the West when we have to turn to people like Lukashenko for doing these things. I would really gladly like to focus on other people. Unfortunately, no one in the West is fucking doing or saying this kind of stuff. Yeah, I wish that they were.
I've been doing a series of interviews with a friend of mine who's a brilliant historian named Aaron Good, who has a book called American Exception, Empire and the Deep State, which
another
is
friend of the stream.
He's a scholar. He's a PhD, and he's a political scientist, and he wrote a history of the U.S. empire and his concept of the deep state, which is related to running the U.S. empire, this undemocratic apparatus. I know you, Brian, have said we should just call that the state, but the point is that there's this undemocratic apparatus of imperial bureaucrats in the Pentagon and the CIA and these other institutions that run a global spanning empire that was created after World War II. And the point that he repeatedly makes in his book, he's a historical materialist, he understands the economic reasons. He constantly points out that at every single stage of the creation of this US empire, the infrastructure we're talking about today, from the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 to the National Security Act in 1947 that created the CIA and the NSA and the National Security Council, to the National Security Council's infamous document NSC 68 in 1950, which outlined the U.S. strategy for the first Cold War. This historian Aaron Good points out in his book that at every single stage, you can find the people involved were Wall Street lawyers. They were capitalists, who were millionaire oligarchs, and they were specifically lawyers working for Wall Street. Allen Dulles, the founder of the CIA, was a Wall Street lawyer. His brother, John Foster Dulles, who became Secretary of State, was a Wall Street lawyer. They worked at one of the most powerful, influential law firms that was working
Nazi
for Wall
sympathizer
Street.
as well.
So it's not hyperbolic to say that the U.S. empire itself was created by Wall Street as a way of expanding its capitalist and financial power around the world. And this entire apparatus of the military-industrial complex is strictly about making money, extracting wealth, and making money for capitalist oligarchs who own all these companies and invest in these big military contractors. So when we're talking about a $1 trillion budget, we should keep in mind that over half of that discretionary budget goes to for-profit corporations, for contractors. We're talking about trillions of dollars every decade being given to private for-profit corporations in the United States. So not only are we talking about massive destruction around the world and chaos and exploitation and violence and death, we're also talking about a scam, a global scam in which it's the biggest pillaging of the public coffers ever in history.
This is a money printing machine.
Every single year, hundreds of billions of dollars go into the pockets of private capitalists, and of course in the process they're risking peace and the ability of life to continue living on this planet. They're actually destroying the planet environmentally, and they're also risking nuclear war as we speak.
Indeed. Very, very important points. I mean, if the U.S. government said to the people of the United States, look, we're going to go to war in Iraq because it has a lot of oil and we want to be able to exploit the natural resources of the country, and we want to take over this territory, and we want to be able to use it for corporations and the super profits of American corporations, nobody would send their son or daughter to go and fight for that war. You're not going to go fight for a war for the exploitation of other people's resources. So you have to say, look, we're sending these soldiers, these troops to the war to defend you from Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. We're sending the weapons and the military to fight in Afghanistan because we're protecting you against future terror attacks like September 11th.
This gets confusing for people as well. I remember there was earlier this week or last week, we had someone asking about the motivations for funding a proxy war in Ukraine. It's like, well, who's actually benefiting from this? And we have this idea that and this is again something that Parenti talks about a lot, but this idea that we're spending more. All this idea about these wars happening for, exploiting natural resources and all this stuff. Well, it doesn't make sense because look how much we're spending to go into these places versus what are our taxpayers that are funding this stuff actually getting out of that prospect. They're spending more than they're getting back. And that's if you have an idea of like, well, the only thing that they're getting back is stuff that's going to benefit the average person. But no, if you look at the oil company CEOs and the weapons manufacturers, they're actually doing quite well. It's publicly funded, privately profitable, publicly subsidized, privately profitable. That's the first line in the theme music for my very first podcast that I did. It's for the propaganda song, the nation states. Publicly subsidized, privately profitable. So all this stuff, all this conflict, it's publicly subsidized. And some people get confused because they're like, well, we're not benefiting from this. The average person isn't benefiting from this. I pay more for gas than I did before. My life's getting more difficult. We're not benefiting from it. But it's like, no, you're not. You're not benefiting from it, but there are people that are benefiting from it quite handsomely, actually. You're just funding it. You're just paying for it. And some of you are going unpaid online and actually engaging in propaganda to support it as well in the ultimate act of pathetic behavior. Talking about the NAFO fellas, the unpaid interns of the intelligence world, literally going on there to manufacture consent for these conflicts, which they do not benefit from in any way. And, of course, the CEOs and shareholders of these weapons manufacturing companies are just raking in cash hand over fist. But don't get confused by that, When you say, well, we're not benefiting from this. We went into Iraq. We didn't get the oil. My gas prices didn't go down. You didn't benefit, but some people did very handsomely. NAFO people make me want to commit Sudoku. Isn't Sudoku like the puzzle? And you said Kermit as well. I don't mean to roast you, transgendal. You said Kermit, Sudoku. Kermit is the frog from Sesame Street, and Sudoku. Okay, it's a meme. Okay, so now I'm exposing myself as being an ignorant old guy. I see. Boy, the tables have turned. I tried to roast you, and now look what's happening to me. Now I am being roasted. So there we go. Now I am the meme. Boomer Rob moment. God damn it. It's a meme because it's TOS to say the actual sentence. Fuck. Redistribution of wealth out of the working class to the bourgeoisie through taxation. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. Even though it's not even like tax money that's funding these things. It's literally they just print the money out of the money printing machine in the basement and they just hand it over to these capitalists. Maybe we aren't from the same generation. This is what I've been saying to you, Petrino. This is what I'm saying to you. No, we're not. I've been trying to... No one clip it. You don't need to clip it. My favorite character from the Muppets is Big Bird. Classic character. Classic character. The roaster has become the roastee. This is typically what happens over here. This is typically what happens over on this program. Be Ann Hero. I do remember Ann Hero. I do remember that. Rob clearly is not following the trendy meme accounts to stay up to date on the latest memes. No, I am not. Remember Boxy? I'm hip. I'm with it. They do benefit. It's just not material. What price would one put on self-righteous clout chasing that make the feels feel gooder? That's true. They do benefit from that. They feel like they're part of some great noble quest. Commit Sudoku is from like 2009. God damn it. Real question, since I know you care about the humans, what is the suggested end to this war in terms of the control the West has over ending it? You got to negotiate. Like, here's the way to not end the war is just to continue pumping billions of dollars of arms and fight the Russians until the last fucking Ukrainian and continue turning their country into a goddamn war zone. They've got to fucking negotiate. Like, they've annexed some territory. Now that seems like actually a great opportunity for me. A great opportunity for the West to say, like, okay, let's stop this now. Let's negotiate. Putin can feel like he gained something. They can go back and make some conditions, go back to the Minsk agreements. Ukraine can be neutral. Ukraine cannot join NATO. You can feel like Putin can feel like he gained something, and everyone can just go home. How about that? And they can stop the violence and stop the bloodshed. How about we pull our special ops and send Blinken to go speak to Lavrov about negotiating an end and stop giving weapons to Ukraine? And yet, like you're pointing out, Red Scare, it's not even weapons. Like there's CIA and there's US and NATO special ops in there operating right now. Maybe stop doing that, I would say. Maybe we can dissolve NATO. I mean, that would be awesome. That would be a good solution for me. Obviously, that's not on the table, but... I'm not doing a gotcha. Do you think it's reasonable to ask Ukraine to give up the territory and walk away, especially given their loss of much of their coast? Like, I'm actually asking, not arguing. Like, here's what I would say, Chami Habibi. I think if you have the idea in your mind that this conflict began in February and Ukraine was just an innocent victim that was just standing idly by and then was just invaded by the evil Russians, if that's what you think, then no, it's not reasonable. I think the actual reality of it is a lot more of a gray area than that narrative, because this conflict has been going on for the last 10 years, and Canada and the United States have been pumping arms and training these militia groups in the country for the last 10 years, specifically to provoke this exact kind of a conflict. So, no, it's not fair. But what's also not fair to Ukrainians is to continue to turn their country into this blood-soaked quagmire. I'd be interested in hearing from the people that have to live in those regions that are being bombed and shelled now for 10 years, and you are now living in a fucking war zone, what they would rather do. I think a lot of people would just rather be able to just go on with their lives and stop having fucking a war happening in their country, So that's what I mean. I don't think it would be reasonable. No, if they were just some innocent victim, the country of Ukraine is an innocent victim. That was the unprovoked, and that's what we always hear, like the unprovoked invasion. It wasn't unprovoked though. And I don't know. I'm anti-war. I don't support Russia engaging in kind of violent militarism any more than I do anyone else. But the idea that it was unprovoked is not accurate. That's not an accurate framing of what happened. So some people may not like it, but I think probably a lot of people would prefer not to have to live in a fucking active war zone, or like escalate it even more. Like we were talking about escalating it even more to like nuclear war. And what would be better for average Ukrainians, to just be able to go on with their lives and stop living in a war zone, or to live in a fucking irradiated wasteland, nonstop quagmire? What would be better for the average person there, I think it would be better for just everyone to just go on with their lives and stop fighting and stop murdering each other. And if Zelensky and his Maidan cronies just dealt with Russia as a real power with legitimate concerns. This is the thing that I always go back to. This is what, in the weeks leading up to this invasion, we were talking about this a lot. You can catch the highlights or the VODs that I still have from December and January, where I talked about this a lot. And frankly, even though I got some things wrong, I didn't think the invasion would even happen. So I was wrong about that, obviously. But I'm still proud of a lot of the work that I did in covering this. And the main takeaway that I had in December and January before this kicked off, and I still believe this, which is that when you look at what the West has done in interfering in the Ukrainian government, going all the way back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Orange Revolution in the 2000s, the Maidan protests, the arming and training and funding these militia groups, funding this conflict, you don't have to like it. But if you look at Russia's perspective on this, any country in the world would view that as being a legitimate threat to their security. Any country in the world, certainly America would. If a foreign country was arming and funding a separatist movement or like a civil war on their border and parking nukes around their country, as America has been doing by expanding NATO, of course America would view that as a threat to their security. They would have fucking bombed the shit out of these places long ago. We all know this. This has been my stance on this from before this happened, and I continue to stand by this. But I think to answer that question again, though, and sorry, you said something. Thanks for answering in good faith. I just want to hear actual takes that aren't just shit on chatter because question. No, I try to avoid that. If someone's going to ask a question, in good faith, I'll try to answer it. But I think for most people, for most average Ukrainians, would rather not live in a fucking war zone. I know I would rather not live in a war zone. And if like losing a bit of territory in this conflict, which was provoked, which was like, or at least both sides played a role in escalating it to that point. If that's worse than fucking living in an irradiated wasteland, then okay. But I don't think it is, personally. Anyway, let's get back to this video. Every month Ukraine delays negotiating, they'll ultimately lose more territory. It does kind of seem like that, yeah. And more people will die. It's just, what is the purpose of continuing to drag that out? You know? The idea that, and I know that our NAFO friends are still holding on to this idea. The idea that they're going to like
we
just
simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
The idea that they're going to push back the Russians and retake Crimea and all this stuff, it's a complete fantasy. It's fantasy land. It's not ever going to happen. Meanwhile, Yemen is being strangulated and decimated by the same forces that cry for Ukraine, hypocrisy galore. And thank you, Dimitri. And that's what we're talking about today, right? We're talking about the hypocrisy, the human rights hypocrisy. And I don't believe anyone in the West has the credibility to wag their finger when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, just like they shouldn't wag their finger about China and Taiwan or anything, when, as we're discussing in this video, they're responsible for the worst fucking human rights atrocities, throughout history, around the world, throughout modern history. It's not that difficult to understand what you're explaining right now, Rob. It's just common sense. How is it possible that so many in the West are not able to get it? And you see how the influence of propaganda and how that plays a large role, and how the Russia bad propaganda has just been nonstop, pervasive since 2016, and has melted a lot of people's brains. That's kind of rude to me, Western liberals keyboard warrior who wants to see the war drag on for the slim hope Putin may be overthrown because so many Russians died. Did you ever think to consult how we feel? That's what I've been saying too, right? These people in like fucking Ohio or Alberta or Virginia or wherever being like, no negotiation, no. It's like, you don't live there. It's literally just a spectator sport for a lot of these people. Hasn't NAFO basically been proven to be an alphabet company psyop at this point? Well, I mean, obviously, yes. I think there are some people that are just like genuinely fucking weirdos that are part of it. But when you have John Cipher, former CIA agent John Cipher, joining the NAFO ranks, it's not that difficult to see what the hell's going on there. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer to that question. There's literally no such thing as former CIA. No, there is not. And even though John Cipher is a friend of the stream, just because he may be a friend of the stream, I can't not criticize him and call him out on this. Did you see the Wall Street Journal report on how the energy crisis in Europe is bolstering U.S. manufacturing? And that's what all this has been about, Bleep Plomp Ben. Ben, thank you for joining us, by the way. That's what it's always been about. It's about American arms manufacturers and American energy companies and getting Western Europe off of cheap Russian gas so you can sell them fracked gas from the United States at a significant cost increase. That's all that's going on here. It's not about sovereignty. It's not about human rights. It's not about democracy. It's about money, as always, every single fucking time. That's what it's about. And anyone that pretends that this is about Ukrainian sovereignty or democracy or human rights or any of this shit has had their brain melted by a nonstop inundation of propaganda. And that's all. And some people don't like to hear this. Maybe there's even some people watching right now that don't like to hear it. But this is one case, I'm sorry, where facts do not care about your feelings. None of the people that are advocating for this war to go on indefinitely give a single fuck about human rights or Ukrainian lives or democracy or any of that bullshit. I'm sorry. If you believe that, it's childish. You're childish. It's a childish thing to believe. Anywho, let's continue watching this video because when we understand, as I mentioned up front, when we understand the level of violence that the United States has spread all across the globe in the name of increasing their own profits for multinational corporations, weapon manufacturers, and others, you'll understand how hypocritical it is for the United States to be criticizing Russia or anywhere else about human rights. You know, it's fucking nonsense. Or China especially, which we're going to get to after. Let's continue.
In Vietnam.
And if anyone is watching this and is like, hey, this guy is saying things that are different from how this is always framed constantly on Twitch and elsewhere, I would encourage you to please subscribe to the channel. That's all. Just a brief, if you like this content and you want to support this kind of viewpoint on Twitch, I know it's few and far between. There's Ben and there's a few in the chat. She does great commentary on this.
We simply
there's a few
use
others
the computer
as well
to mark up the size of the account.
But if you want to support this kind of viewpoint on Twitch, please subscribe. And I'm sorry to turn it into a commodified thing, but this is what I'm forced to do. It's not my fault if reality is Marxist. That's it, Dimitri. Thank you. Wait. You mean the very convenient timing of that pipeline being sabotaged after Biden explicitly said that they would destroy the pipeline? Just happened to line up in a time where American oil exports to the EU.
You're going to have good old Rob to
I've been increasing
talk through all this.
And this move will ensure that Russia will be at a disadvantage even if peace is made. It does kind of seem like that, doesn't it? It does kind of seem like that. Thank you, John, for the gifted sub. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Vietnam, we're sending, tens of thousands of young Americans to their death, not to mention the millions of Vietnamese, not because we want to dominate Southeast Asia and exploit it or super exploit it. We're doing it to save democracy and stop communism. I mean, it's always designed in a way to lie to the people, because if you actually told the truth about what the wars were for, the whole country and the population would rise up against them, including those inside the armed forces, including those who are in uniform. So this public relations campaign is designed to keep the people sort of in a stultified sense, sort of politically asleep. And then when you think about
a certain anarcho-Bidenist YouTuber said Castro was insane and tried to get the USSR to nuclear first strike America. Isn't that literally a myth? I think it is a myth, and I don't support that particular individual. They've sent another silly video, and I don't think we need to endlessly speculate on that. But if it was true, I would support it.
Actual history of modern wars, since we're talking about how military interventions have increased after World War II and then again after 1991, when you think about the economic element of this, Ben, which is what you're getting at, and I think it's not simply the benefit of the greedy capitalists who own these corporations, but it's about maintaining the stability of the capitalist system itself. In the 1930s, there was a global economic depression. It looked like capitalism was basically finished. There was the problem of overproduction. Capitalism was producing more than could be sold at a profit. But by going to war and by military spending, it brought these depressed economies back to life, because now they were producing bombs and missiles and tanks. And then the war destroyed all the existing means of production in Europe, for instance, or in Japan. All the factories were destroyed, the cities were destroyed. So then they had to be rebuilt. And so the U.S. was able to use the destruction of the violence in World War II to start the rebuilding. So you can see capitalism itself.
Yes, it is, King Uendo.
Is in a way organically connected to militarism. This is modern day capitalism. And then just one more important historical caveat before I throw it back to you and get your thoughts. After World War II, the country was starting to go back into depression. There was another economic recession that was beginning in 1947 after the U.S. demobilized this massive military machine that it used to fight its adversaries in World War II.
Is he saying that capitalism is actually antithetical to freedom and liberty because it simply cannot stand any sort of alternative system thriving and challenging its hegemony? I know some wild, high-level ideas being thrown around here. Seriously, Dimitri, the business plot is something we need to be taught in school. It shows the tide of fascism through our system. Yeah, and the business plot, that's the thing, the business plot ultimately was a success. You know, they wanted to overthrow undemocratically FDR. Since they couldn't do that, they played the long game instead. And, you know, the Reagan era ultimately finished off what the business plot wanted to do decades earlier, destroying whatever vestiges of New Deal liberalism left or were remained in the United States.
But then the Korean War started in June 1950, and the U.S. remobilized the military, and it's never been demobilized since. That was when we had a permanent warfare state. It was starting in 1950. We call it the military-industrial complex. That was the name that Eisenhower gave it. But the reality is it was a stimulant, an economic stimulant, sort of a welfare program designed by the federal government for the capitalists, but they gave it the imprimatur of security, of defense, of keeping the country safe, rather than what it really is a plundering of the national treasury for the benefit of this same tiny capitalist class and their system, which can't exist, in fact, in the modern era without military spending and without militarism.
That's exactly right. This is another huge element of this in the military-industrial complex, which is that when this system emerges after the end of World War II, the United States really became the global protector of capitalism. You're absolutely right, Brian. We should stress this point that capitalism was on the verge of crisis and on the verge of collapse. It was in crisis, and there were socialist movements taking power throughout the world. Not just in the Soviet Union, but especially across the global South. Of course, pretty much every national liberation struggle against European colonialism was led by socialists, some kind of left-wing force. You know, of course, we saw what happened to Sukarno in Indonesia, who was one of the conveners of the non-aligned movement. Of course, we saw something similar with Nkrumah, with a coup in Ghana, in Egypt with Nasser, in Congo with Patrice Lumumba. All of these leaders who were socialist-oriented, left-leaning, they were overthrown in coups or assassinated. Of course, we saw the over 600 assassination attempts against Fidel Castro in Cuba. I still believe that out of all people in human history, there were more assassination attempts against Fidel Castro than anyone else, more than against Hitler, more than the most brutal, genocidal, fascist dictators. Nope. The U.S. tried to kill Fidel Castro at least 638 times, according to the documents that we have. So this is a brutal war to defeat socialism everywhere. And the U.S. ruling class took it upon itself to protect capitalism. And of course, they were making money off of it. It wasn't simply out of benevolence. It was to keep the system going because they profited from
Meshuga says war is a right-wing public works project. I mean, I think what you're saying is right, but I think framing it as right-wing is not even really accurate, right? Because it's completely bipartisan. You know, liberals have historically been just as on board with this public works project as conservatives have. But what you're saying is correct. Absolutely.
From the system. And still today, I mean, in this new Cold War, the second Cold War that we're talking about, it's not exactly the same, of course. Russia is not the Soviet Union, and the Russian leadership certainly has, Putin has made anti-communist comments. But China is still a socialist government governed by a socialist party. And also, if we look at the economic model pursued by the United States, which is a thoroughly neoliberal model that even is actually even significantly more right-wing and brutally exploitative than even the capitalist model in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, which was the Keynesian era, or in the neoliberal era, where there are very few controls on capital in the United States and parts of Western Europe. And the US continues to try to impose that neoliberal model across the planet using not only military force. Of course, we saw that in Iraq. We can never forget that when the US was trying to overthrow all of these countries with independent governments, many of which had been allied with the Soviet Union and had kind of state-led economic models, if not socialist, like we saw, for instance, in Yugoslavia or Libya, at least a kind of resource nationalist model, like we saw, for instance, in Iraq. The US tried to overthrow all of these governments that had independent economic models and then replace them with Chicago boy-style Pinochet neoliberal models. This is exactly what happened in Iraq after the 2003 invasion. We saw interns from the American Enterprise Institute were parachuted in to the Green Zone, and basically they were trained, these interns were trained on how to privatize the Iraqi economy and sell off all the state assets. This is what the US capitalist class would like to do to every country on earth, including Russia, which, despite the fact that Russia doesn't have a socialist economic model anymore, it does have significant state control over the strategic natural resources like oil and gas and some minerals. And certainly China. China has the 4 largest banks.
They're doing it to Ukraine too.
All state-owned banks. China has.
They're doing this to Ukraine as well, right? During this whole process, Ukraine's entire economy is being privatized. You know, this exact kind of process is happening in Ukraine right now. The neoliberal shock reforms, shock doctrine shit.
Has public ownership of all land. China has still significant ownership of the commanding heights of the economy. So although the new Cold War is not exactly the same as the first Cold War, there still is a class war element, and that is a war led by Wall Street and the capitalist class against any economic alternative to neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah. Each and every one of the U.S. wars is, in fact, a rich man's war. I mean, this is really important for people, especially working class folks and young people who are going to be the human material for the next war, whatever it is, to realize that this is the rich man's war. This is the war for capitalism. In that sense, it's always a class war. Even if the target isn't a communist or a socialist government, the goals of the war are capitalist goals. This is a capitalist war drive. It's a perennial war drive. And now the U.S. is preparing for global major power conflict, as they call it, ever since the 2018 Pentagon Quadrennial Report, which means to get ready for war with China.
I've been saying this.
Does that seem crazy?
This is some guy,
to
Rob
you?
Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hello, Zach. Hello, Raiders. Get in here, Raiders. Hello. Welcome. I'm Rob. Smash the follow button if you're not familiar with this channel. Look at the pause face on Ben Norton there. Oh, my God. Great paused face on Ben Norton. I appreciate the raid, Zach. Thanks a lot. Has Ukraine gone through the sudden harsh shock therapies that countries like Chile did? Yeah, they have. They banned labor organizing. They're privatizing their whole economy. Like, that is going on right now in Ukraine. And another thing that is not good for the average Ukrainian. And what these supposed pro-Ukraine Westerners who just advocate for endless weapons transfers are literally advocating for. They want to they love Ukraine so much and they want to protect Ukraine so much that they're turning their country into an endless war zone and ensuring that their entire economy is privatized. There's no more labor organizing. There's no more social programs, no fucking nothing. I mean, pre-war. Well, yes, pre-war also, because after the Maidan revolution, kind of color revolution, they took a deal with they became more EU friendly and were cutting deals like with the IMF and with the EU, which as always with precursors to that involve that kind of privatization, involve that kind of neoliberalization. Look, you can see it right here. You can see it right here. That's such an amazing face on Ben Norton. Ukraine and the IMF. There's a segment just on this, on the post-Maidan. I think this kind of answers your question. In February 2014, Yanukovych and Azarov were overthrown and replaced by the first Yatsenyuk government. The following month, which was specifically put in place through Western support, as we've that infamous call from Victoria Nuland, the Deputy Secretary of State, if I remember correctly, being like, Yatsar's our guy, right? He's their guy. The following month, the IMF required Ukraine to reform its natural gas price subsidies in return for an aid package of about $15 billion. One of the expected effects was a 50% price increase for natural gas sold to domestic consumers, right? So these neoliberal reforms started immediately in the post-Maidan era. You know, it's not just going on right now. It's not just going on during the war. It has been going on since the pro-Western, pro-EU, pro-NATO government was put into place. The IMF sucks. No, this is the point that I'm trying to make here, Texture Splunky. I agree with you. I agree with you. And exactly, Red Scary, that's exactly what happened. It is strange that they would meddle in affairs. I know, it's bizarre. I can't believe this. I thought that they were just completely being left alone to democratically make their own sovereign decisions, but apparently that's not what's been happening. Not that you hear much about that in Ukraine coverage on mainstream media or even here on Twitch. And exactly, Red Scary, the playbook is usually to get a government in that will take an IMF loan that has the conditions on the loan to enforce austerity and privatize the economy. This is what I mean. This shock doctrine neoliberal reforms, they didn't just start a couple months ago during the war. It's been going on since the post-Maidan era. Let's continue this video.
Gas, because it is crazy. But so is the U.S. war drive. It's not really just policy mistake, and policy mistake. This is a system, the system of imperialism in the modern era.
Plus the cheap Ukrainian labor used in other European countries. Huh.
Capitalism is in fact addicted to a nonstop U.S. war drive. And with that, Ben, I want to turn to an article that appeared today in the New York Times. It's an amazing headline. It's about Taiwan. And the article basically says, I'll read the headline to you, and maybe we have it that we can put up on the screen. It says, U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into giant weapon depot. Okay, everybody, U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into giant weapons depot. You know what I love about this headline? Is it's honest.
And again, look at this headline. This is official in the New York Times. Aims to turn Taiwan into giant weapons depot. Yet when China does anything to push back against this, when they engage in military drills, if they ever do anything to reunite Taiwan with the Chinese mainland, it's going to be framed as an unprovoked invasion. If this moment ever does come, and I don't even know if it will come because I don't know if China's going to fall for that trap. But if China ever does anything, it's like, why is China being so aggressive? Why are they being so aggressive with this? What is this unprovoked aggression against Taiwan? When it's like, as I was saying with Russia and Ukraine, what country wouldn't consider this to be a threat to their security? What country in the world wouldn't consider this a threat to their security when you've got the largest military power in the world by far saying, we want to turn this island directly on your border into a massive weapons depot? And they're supposed to just say like, okay, thank you. Please continue. Right? It's fucking ludicrous to think that they shouldn't respond to this in any way. They have no say in this whatsoever. My country that I own in my head, exactly. Yeah. You get leftists still buying into the Uyghur genocide myth, and it's in any way comparable to the residential schools in the US and Canada, which the aforementioned is pure evil shit. We'll get to that after, because that was something that I wanted to get to after, because there's been some new stuff going on with all that, with the UN vote and some other news stories. But this is what I mean. Like, if China ever did do anything to reunite Taiwan with the Chinese mainland, that's how it's going to be framed in U.S. media, right? The unprovoked invasion, this unprovoked aggression. When it's like, this is what they're responding to. Who wouldn't respond to this? You know, it's fucking madness. Oh man, I've had my video settings all fucked up this whole time. I'm fixing them now. Now I look even better. I had my white balance all messed up there. It's so delectable to now see China, a country which its cheap labor have been exploited by the capitalist class from Western countries for decades, being now able to help African countries to develop their society, which might very well prevent later the West from turning on exploiting African labor, when it will become no more possible for them to do it with better paid Chinese labor anymore. I mean, that's the genius of Dengism, right? You don't have to like that Deng Xiaoping guy. You don't have to like it, but you have to kind of hand it to him. It's almost like they allowed Western capital to come into their country to build up their productive forces, which then allows them to offer this alternative path for development to nations in Africa and Latin America and elsewhere. It's almost like that, isn't it? If you think about it a little bit. Maybe some of those decisions were not so bad after all. Maybe they weren't just selling out to the capitalist West. Maybe they were doing what they had to do to continue building socialism in the only way they knew how, without the West breathing down their fucking necks and thinking that they were on board. Maybe it's something like that. Who knows? Who knows, though? Don't ask me.
It's one of those rare moments where whoever wrote the headline will probably be fired or laid off later today. Official says Taiwan needs to become a, quote, porcupine with enough weapons to hold off if the Chinese military blockades and invades it. Now, Ben, the United States government's official policy since 1972 is that Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan is part of China. The Shanghai Communique, signed by the Nixon administration with Mao and Zhou Enlai, and reaffirmed in 1979 when Deng Xiaoping came and met with Jimmy Carter, and reaffirmed again in the 1980s. And 3 different communiques, the United States says Taiwan is part of China. We acknowledge that Taiwan is part of China. And now we see from the New York Times, the U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into a giant weapons depot. Well, one is that obviously violates the Shanghai Communique and the acknowledgement that Taiwan is part of China. I mean, can you imagine, for instance, if Hawaii, which is much further from the mainland of the United States than Taiwan is from China, if the Chinese were pumping billions of dollars and making Hawaii a weapons depot, as the New York Times calls it, against the rest of the United States? Can we? I mean, this would start World War III. And yet there's kind of this cavalier treatment about what the U.S. is actually doing, turning Taiwan into a weapons depot. Now, just for the people who may be hearing this show for the first time, China was a dismembered country by Western colonialism. The Chinese call it the century of humiliation. Taiwan was stolen from China by Japanese imperialism in 1895. So a big part of the Chinese Revolution, in addition to socialism, in addition to overcoming underdevelopment and poverty, et cetera, it's also reuniting the dismembered parts of China. So for the U.S. to take a part of China, which it recognizes as part of China, Taiwan, and make it into a U.S. Pentagon weapons depot, means that the U.S. is not only reckless and not only provocative, but is actually preparing for war with China on the issue of Taiwan. And the American sort of thinking here is it will be like Ukraine. We can fight China the way we're fighting Russia. We can have other people do the bleeding. We can have other people do the dying. Then it won't be a political liability at home. As George W. Bush said after September 11th, when he told the American people, just keep shopping. Just keep shopping. That's what your job is, to keep shopping. And in the meantime, we'll let everybody else do all the bleeding. Anyway.
There's, when it comes to this whole like Taiwan thing, this headline that they're talking about as well, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation also, right? They're saying simultaneously, we need to pump billions of dollars of arms into Taiwan just in case China invades them, which they admit is it's the same country. It's part of China. It's their own U.S. government policy. But somehow they don't think, or they do think, but this is not mentioned, somehow they don't think that us pumping arms into this country is actually going to increase the likelihood that China is going to do this rather than decrease it. Because China, just as any other fucking country in the world would, is going to take a look at the United States pumping billions of dollars of weapons into this island directly off their coast and view that correctly as a threat to their security and sovereignty. It's going to increase the likelihood that they invade or try to reunify with Taiwan and not decrease it. You know, we need to pump billions of dollars just in case they do that. And they don't think that perhaps they're increasing the likelihood of that outcome rather than decreasing it. Or they do, but they don't say that as much in the New York Times.
That's what makes this a dangerous moment.
That's absolutely right, Brian. And the reality is that the U.S. government is preparing for war with China, conventional war. The U.S. has been waging a hybrid war on China for several years, a trade war through sanctions and tariffs and all these different policies. It's certainly been waging an information war with ridiculous, politically motivated accusations. I'm not even going to say what they are. I mean, we all know the ridiculous, hyperbolic accusations made against China. And of course, another part of hybrid war is...
Notice all these bases here.
We see that the U.S. is now
Notice all these U.S. military bases
war.
here.
So a conventional war over Taiwan. And the fact that the media so casually refers to this island with over 20 million people as a weapons depot, I think it really gives lie to this marketing strategy that the U.S. government has used for the past decade or so of trying to say that this is a conflict between so-called democracy and authoritarianism. Now, Taiwan, which is part of China, was governed for decades by a brutal fascistic dictatorship under Chiang Kai-shek. And the U.S. government strongly, deeply, to its core, supported that fascistic dictatorship of Chiang Kai-shek for decades. It was not in any way a bourgeois democracy. Now it has...
That's it. When Russia sent missiles to Cuba, that was a threat to their security, and they risked nuclear war to stop. When the U.S. sends weapon to Taiwan, that's totally cool and based and no problem. Or Ukraine. Right? Or Ukraine.
As a bourgeois democracy, and we all know how limited the actual democracy is, because Taiwan's bourgeois democracy is a democracy in the sense of other so-called bourgeois democracies in which rich people can, buy elections, or as Lenin famously said, it's a democracy it's the same as in ancient Greece, democracy for the slave owners. But the reality is that now this
or a dictatorship of
narrative
capital
that's being used to try to support separatism in Taiwan is that Taiwan is a so-called democratic bulwark. Well, if it's a democratic bulwark, then how is it also a weapons depot? Which one is it? And the reality is we all know that it's actually a weapons depot. It's not about democracy. It's about advancing U.S. imperial interests directly in China's territory. And you mentioned Hawaii, Brian. I mean, I think a better example might be something like Florida. I mean, Hawaii, there's a genuine, legitimate indigenous independence movement in Hawaii, and Hawaii was colonized by the United States in the way that Taiwan was not colonized by China. And Hawaii only became formally a state in 1959 after being colonized by the United States. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. It's not even a state, and we now see that 2 weeks after a brutal hurricane, there are still hundreds of thousands of people in Puerto Rico who are technically U.S. citizens who don't have electricity. So, I mean, those aren't good comparisons to Taiwan. A good comparison is Florida. Florida is obviously part of the United States. Everyone recognizes that. They have similar populations, around 20 million people. They have similar kind of positions in the geopolitics of the country. Imagine if China were supporting separatist forces in Florida to become an independent country, and imagine China were selling billions of dollars of weapons to Florida and hope to make a military base in Florida. What would the response of the United States be? Let's not forget, Brian, this is not just empty, speculation here. There is a historical precedent of the United States for decades having an active military base on the island of Taiwan during the first Cold War. So after the victory of the communists in the Chinese Civil War in 1949, people probably know that Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang forces, the nationalists, they fled to Taiwan.
This is an interesting question, HTA. Do you think that John Q. American is going to go along with war with China? I want to have faith that people won't stand for it, but who knows? I mean, a lot of it depends, I think, on whether people's standard of living goes down or not. But, propaganda is a thing. The media is a really, really powerful tool. I saved this graph actually to take a look at for this exact kind of reason. Look at the way that people's opinion have changed on China over the last 20 years. This Pew Research poll illustrates how the world has changed its view on China in the last 20 years. And you can look at every single country, and you see the favorable going down and unfavorable going up, especially around right here. Right? There's this shift right around there, and that's exactly around the Obama era pivot to Asia, right there. There's in South Korea, in the United States, you can see it there. And it immediately just goes in the opposite fucking direction. Every single country. The media is a really powerful tool. Is Australia on here? Australia has been a big part of this as well. Yeah, there it is. Look at that. There's the pivot to Asia right there. You can see it every single time. Every single time you can see it. So as much as I would like to think that people won't, and you can see it up close more, better like this. There's the pivot to Asia, right? There it is. There's when this propaganda campaign started. They're right around there. The media is a really, really powerful tool. People will do as they're told when the media tells them China bad, not just once, but over and over and over and over again for years. We've seen it even with our supposed leftists, supposed critical thinkers have gone all in on the China bad stuff, right? So the people that are outside the mainstream, the people that are here on Twitch doing independent journalism, they're the exact same fucking way. So as much as I would like to think that people in the United States or Canada, there it is again. There's where the propaganda campaign starts. As much as I would like to think that people won't be on board with that, the media is a really, really powerful tool. And ultimately, people that are living in these societies, when we're constantly inundated with Western propaganda at all times, in every fight, in our media, like our news media, in our in Hollywood, it's just nonstop. And people think that they're outside of that, but they're not. They're in this Western bubble of propaganda. And people will ultimately fall in line and do as they're told, as we see from all these graphs throughout the Western world. So I don't have a lot of confidence, no, that people won't go along with that once it really kicks off. Look at how things flipped on Russia and Ukraine so quickly overnight. How even advancing some of the viewpoints that I've been talking about on this stream became totally like cancel worthy basically overnight.
Also known as Formosa, and they created this bastion backed by the United States to try to wage war against the People's Republic of China. And even though the Kuomintang still recognizes that...
So this seems like a good quote. You asked me what the English workers think about colonial policy. Well, exactly the same as they think about politics in general. The same as their bourgeois think. There is no workers' party here. You see, there are only conservatives and liberal radicals, and the workers gaily share the feast of England's monopoly of the world market with the colonies. Engels, yeah. And as Lenin points out as well, right? We don't have a free press. We don't have a free press in the West. We have a capitalist press. And as long as the capitalist oligarchs that rule our societies decide that war with China is a good thing, that will be reflected in our media, and people will fall in line.
Taiwan is part of China, People's Republic. Well, they consider it the Republic. They also claim the mainland. But the reality is that at that same time, we know in the Taiwan Strait crisis in 1958 that the U.S. military leadership, the National Security Council, they wanted to nuke mainland China in alliance with the Kuomintang forces. And the U.S. military had nuclear weapons stored on Taiwan in the 1950s. Throughout the 1950s, up until the 1970s, the U.S. had nuclear weapons and thousands of U.S. troops stationed on Taiwan, prepared for a nuclear war with the People's Republic of China. And the U.S. troops did not leave until the end of the 1970s after the series of agreements, the 3 communiques signed, in which the U.S. recognized the One China policy.
Based Nixon.
What is the U.S. strategy here? It is not only...
Unfortunately. You don't want to, but sometimes, I'm sorry, but sometimes you do have to hand it to him. And I take no pleasure in reporting this. Sometimes you do have to hand it to Nixon.
Support separatism. It is not only to send billions of dollars of weapons to Taiwan.
The worst person you know just made a good point. And he got Watergated over it. Yeah, that's right.
In a kind of neo-colony with thousands of U.S. troops.
Although that wasn't explicitly over China, but more just about him trying to assert control over the intelligence community that actually controls the United States government. Otherwise, I think, and that's another thing about Deng Xiaoping, is that the economic reforms of China of the late 70s that led to those peace talks with Nixon and the legitimization of the PRC, they thought they could make money in China, and they did. They made billions of dollars, but they also funded Chinese development and helped turn China into a global superpower, which is now able to help other countries develop outside of that Western system. So Deng kind of got one over on them there, didn't he?
Troops and nuclear weapons. And we still see today, World War II ended in 1945. The U.S. still has 28,000. Well, the Korean War
when Deng
never
owns
ended.
your ass. He
the U.S.
did.
has 28,000 troops in South Korea. And in Japan, the U.S. still has tens of thousands of troops in Japan who have been there since 1945. So that is what the U.S. strategy is for Taiwan as well.
Indeed. Yes, the U.S. has 11 military bases in Japan, in Okinawa. The people in Japan, the local people, are constantly rising up against the problems caused by the U.S. military occupation of their country. And again, that was 1945 when it started. We're in 2022. So you are absolutely right. And the U.S. military force.
That feeling when you get absolutely owned by this man. That feeling when you think you've got China under your thumb and this man completely fucking uses you to fund the development of his country and eliminate extreme poverty and provide this alternative development for the global south. This is the guy. This is the guy that, if not dealt a death blow to Western hegemony, gave it a good liver shot, which was then kind of finished off with the war on terror shit. You might not like it, but this is what peak male performance looks like.
Forces are actually all over the countries that they occupied at the end of World War II, including Germany. Germany is occupied by U.S. military forces. Ben, I want to go back to your article as we start to move towards the finish line here. Your article, using Congressional Research Service, the U.S. government's own statistics, the Congressional Research Agency's own statistics, documents almost 500 military interventions since 1798. Now, the U.S. becomes an independent country, in essence, in 1783. And then in 1787, there was the U.S. Constitution was passed in secret. The U.S. federal government is formed. I want to walk through some of this history because the kinds of military interventions actually change quite a bit. The U.S. between 1783 or 1787 and say 1898, it's still going to war. Obviously, the U.S. stole half of Mexico. That was in the war in the 1840s. It took half of Mexico. There's many other military interventions that happen. But the U.S. capitalist class is really focused on going to war against the original inhabitants of North America, meaning the indigenous people. I mean, I'm looking at and reading this book. I'll hold it up. American Holocaust, The Conquest of the New World by David Stannard. Here's the book for people who want to see it. It documents the genocide that was committed over all the Americas, South, Central, and North America. But U.S. capitalism in the monopoly, pre-monopoly capitalist phase, it's on the march. It's not like it's not intervening and going to war, but it's going to war against the people who occupied this land, the land of North America, for tens of thousands of years. And basically, the wars are designed to steal their land. And if it required the decimation and genocide of the people who lived here, so be it. And so it was. But then in 1898, after Europe has already been on a colonial path, and China's in a state of semi-colonization, India's been colonized, most of Latin America's been colonized. By the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1902, almost all of Africa, with the exception of Ethiopia, all colonized. So the U.S. gets into the colonial race kind of late in the game because it's busy colonizing or destroying the indigenous inhabitants in North America to secure
We
the
simply
U.S.
use the computer to mark up the size of the account
for capitalism.
The Counter-Revolution of 1776 by Gerald Horne. That's it. I've really got to get Gerald Horne to come on this stream, don't I? Don't I, Dimitri? And thank you very much for the friend coin as well.
But then in 1898, it goes to war and it seizes the Philippines. It seizes Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. And the U.S. is off to the races starting then. And so there's this new era of military interventions outside of the mainland of North America. Then World War II happens, and after the end of World War II, all of those colonial empires that I mentioned, they're basically in ruins, but the U.S. puts the pieces back together of the world capitalist system. And now the U.S. is going to war against all of the countries or peoples or movements that want to become independent. That's the era of decolonization, where the people are fighting national liberation movements in the so-called third world and getting the assistance of the socialist camp, and in some cases, many cases, being led by communists. So this is a third chapter of U.S. military wars. That's the war in Korea, the war in Vietnam. As you mentioned, it's not called a war, but basically the war against the people of Congo, the intervention against the people of Guatemala when they dared to nationalize the United Fruit Company. So there's that era between 1945 and 1991, which is called the Cold War. We call it the era of global class war, where the people fighting for national liberation and socialism or are in alliance with each other, they're the targets of the U.S. war drive. And then the socialist camp is destroyed, and instead of it becoming an era of peace, since America's enemies have been vanquished, a new era, a fourth era, again, of military intervention, and it's even of a greater number. There's an exponential increase. So you can see over this long trajectory of U.S. history, at least 4 distinct periods where the U.S. is at war, first against the indigenous inhabitants of North America, and then it goes and tries to capture colonies and compete with European colonialism. Then after World War II, it's the global class war, or so-called Cold War. and now this fourth era since 1991. The thing that's remarkable through these four very distinct phases in U.S. history is the fact that the military element of it never stops. It's always dominant. I mean, and I think this is really important to understand the politics and the culture of the United States. This reliance on perpetual, endless violence and war is as American as apple pie, so to speak. Again, I think that, the Congressional Research Service has provided the documentation, but it wasn't a big story in the mainstream media. I mean, people can go to your website, multipolarista.com.
Come on, Brian.
Which is a great website, and people should go there. But that wasn't reported in the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and so on. Ben, as we move towards the finish line, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yeah, Brian, you kind of obliquely referenced this famous quote from H. Rap Brown, who said, "Violence is as American as cherry pie." And that's absolutely right. We see that it's so integral to the external empire, but also the internal empire. And fortunately, this is something that people are becoming more and more cognizant of, that the United States was founded on settler colonialism and genocide of the indigenous nations. And I should point out that in this report that I did, looking at the data from the Congressional Research Service, they emphasized 2 times in their report, they stress that they're only considering external military interventions. They don't consider the deployment of military forces against indigenous peoples inside the current borders of the United States. So in many ways, these statistics are also extremely conservative because they don't consider the massive westward expansion and the role of the military in ethnically cleansing indigenous nations. And of course, another point that I think we should keep in mind is that we have this idea now.
And by the way, Ben talking about this is why the MAGA communists can't stand him so much, because he talks about, settler colonialism, and he talks about, the genocide of indigenous peoples. The MAGA communists can't stand that. That's why they target Ben, but he's absolutely right. And anyone that's going to be on the left or call yourself a socialist or whatever, and you don't care about, the genocide of indigenous people, and you don't care about the idea of settler colonialism, that's just, it's total fucking bullshit. Nazbal's coping and seething. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Of the United States as this contiguous country that goes from the Atlantic
and
to the
ignore
Pacific,
Dr. Horn
right?
as a communist historian.
But the reality is that the process of westward expansion and settler colonialism was coexistent with also a process of southern imperial expansion, taking Mexico and occupying huge parts of Latin America. And the fact that the U.S. couldn't take more of Mexico is ultimately what prevented it from colonizing even more parts of what are now Latin America. And then also the inter-imperialist rivalry between British colonialism and French colonialism, which gave birth to Canada and the differences there. The reality is that, this westward expansion and then expansion to places.
Do you think MAGA communism is a real enough thing that it needs to be discussed? I hear a lot of discourse on it. I think it's a purely online phenomenon. So no, it doesn't really need to be discussed. I think actually it's purely like a wrecker movement designed to take people that are engaged in sort of left-wing activism or journalism or media criticism or whatever it is and tie them up in these fucking knots dealing with these weird trolls and losers. I think that's so I generally try to avoid talking about it. I might like to make a few offhand comments about how ridiculous it is, but I think it's literally an op as well. Yeah, it's an opportunist cult. It's an op. There's probably federal involvement in it as well. I mean, they are just fascists. They're people that are taking the aesthetics of socialism and trying to turn it towards this very reactionary project. And dehumanizing gay and trans people was a part of that. Suggesting that indigenous activism or giving land back is some kind of bourgeois liberalism. That's I think displaying exactly everything you need to know about it. These are the people that use these left-wing aesthetics to advance this reactionary project. So we can make fun of it every now and then, but no, I don't think it's worthwhile to spend a lot of time debunking it or arguing with these people or debating them or doing anything. They want that, right? These people want to be debated. They want to be brought onto shows to be able to spread their bullshit and turn it into a big like pro wrestling spectacle, but I don't think we should be doing that.
Like Hawaii. I mentioned Hawaii didn't become a U.S. state until 1959. We should keep in mind that the idea of the United States as this, seat-assigning sea contiguous nation with 50 states is a very recent political development, and it's a product of colonialism. And so when we see that the U.S. ruling class, when it finished that process of imperial colonial.
Yeah, the first time it came up was the Starbucks baristas aren't workers. Yeah, anti-union bullshit. Or during the trucker convoy, these people were all on board with saying, why are we real communists should be going into this anti-communist movement of fucking small business owners having this big tantrum about getting a vaccine, and you should be supporting these people, these like clear reactionaries. That was when I first kind of started paying attention to any of these people. They're very strange people. They really can't stop crying about baristas and blue hair dye. It's just pure reactionary bullshit. Yeah.
Land consolidation from sea to signing sea, then it began expanding its empire internationally. So these processes are inextricably linked.
Yeah, Richard Wolff, that was a big L for him.
It's because
I agree.
The capitalist class, it needs to externalize that super exploitation in order to extract wealth. So the U.S. capitalist class, it first used wealth of slave labor, chattel slavery of Africans, millions of Africans who were enslaved, not because simply, racism was a huge element of it, but racism was the justification for the economic exploitation of African labor. White supremacy was created by the colonialists to justify their enslavement and exploitation of human beings. And similarly, when slavery was abolished, you had Jim Crow and a kind of new form of wage slavery, but then you also had the continuous expansion and basically infinite land that the U.S. capitalist class could use, and that infinite land came from the genocide and ethnic cleansing of indigenous nations. And then when Manifest Destiny was completed and the U.S. was this contiguous country from sea to signing sea, the capitalist class needs to find new forms of super exploitation and new labor.
Except colonialism is zero sum. No wealth was created because it was simultaneously destroyed. Not sure I follow you on that one, Alex. I think quite a lot of wealth was created in colonialism, actually, unless I'm mistaking what your point is, or Al. The British, famously, they stole trillions of dollars of wealth from India during colonialism. It seems like quite a bit of wealth was created, so I'm not totally sure I get you there on that one.
To exploit and new resources to extract, and that can do that through imperialism abroad. So capitalism has always been predicated on what you call primitive accumulation.
Ainsley.
And we can't understand how the capitalist class gets its wealth without that primitive accumulation. In the case of the British Empire and the British capitalist class, it was enclosure of land, pushing peasants off their land, and colonialism in Ireland, and then colonialism across, 1/4 of the planet. In the case of capitalist accumulation in the United States, primitive accumulation, it was through colonialist expansion and now imperialism today. So capitalism is inextricably tied to imperialism, and it is a free lunch, except that actual free lunch for Wall Street, for the capitalists, is based on slavery and ethnic cleansing and genocide and war and exploitation. It's not so free for the people on the receiving end of the free lunch. But I think we just really need to keep in mind how those historical processes are directly tied together, and how it's not a coincidence that after the U.S. finished this process of manifest destiny and settler colonialism, the number of foreign military interventions abroad skyrocketed, because it's part of the same process of capitalist extraction and accumulation.
Indeed, as Karl Marx said, capitalism as an economic order came into existence with blood and dirt dripping from every pore. Again, the form of government has shifted, and as we talked about earlier, Ben, because of public because public opinion matters in the modern era, the sensibilities about public opinion have reshaped the capitalist narrative so that its endless war drive, which we have now seen has gone on for centuries, is given a new set of public
We have a link to the video.
rationales,
Sorry,
but it's
B-Rad, I
still
missed
the
that.
same capitalist, economic-driven
There
war
we go.
drive.
For anyone
And
else
for
that wants
people
to
who believe and
watch the
want
video.
peace, we have to be against war, but not just against war. War is not simply the absence of peace. War is also the absence of justice, and capitalism is a system premised on injustice. Ben Norton, thank you so much for joining us. Again, we encourage all of our audience to go to multipolarista.com to read this article and your other writings. Ben Norton, thanks so much.
Thanks to you and the entire team at Breakthrough News. You all are doing amazing work. It's always a real pleasure.
Big fan of, big enjoyer of both of these fellows, Brian Becker and Benjamin Norton. We also heard from fellow friend of the stream, Aaron Good, during that. I'm happy to be even marginally connected to some of these people doing really wonderful work when it comes to this kind of commentary. This is great stuff. I'm glad we could watch that. I have more stuff to talk about on this subject. Oh God, what is this? What's going on here? Why is it doing that? Why is it doing that, folks? I have more stuff to talk about on this kind of human rights hypocrisy. I got to take a brief interlude, okay? I have about less than an hour left to stream. I'm coming up on 3 hours of the stream today, and I'm sitting here with 9 subs, and I just want to once again take a moment to remind people that if you enjoy this stream and this content and you want to support it, you can do so by subscribing to this channel, which costs $5. You can also use your Amazon Prime account to subscribe to the channel absolutely free, completely free of charge. You can also gift subscriptions. You can gift friend coin. A number of different ways you can contribute to this stream. Always very, very helpful. And as you see in the bottom corner, of course, when you do subscribe to the channel, you are joining a revolutionary program, the Friendship Triangle Clout Distribution Friendship Access Opportunity. This is a little diagram.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Little diagram that kind of indicates what that's all about. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, if you're not a non-subscriber right now, if you're just a lurker, and I appreciate the lurkers, I do, the non-subscribers, but that's you right now. So you're on the outside looking in, and you see when you do subscribe to the channel, you get into that base level of the Friendship Triangle system, right? And you can gift subs to move up and down throughout the system into the chaos zone, into the elite level, where the trickle-down clout the patented trickle-down clout system is the most concentrated. My face when I find out Rob is an alt channel he does gambling streams on. Of course, yeah. And Ainsley, thank you so much. Ainsley, thanks for the 3-month resub at tier 1. Very much appreciated. Thank you. So I just have to take a few minutes to try and make number go up. I've got to try and make number go up.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Cheeseburger Freedom Eagle. 420 friend coin. Thank you very much. Is it a reverse funnel? I mean, the main thing about it is that it's a two-dimensional triangle. For the clout.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness gracious. Red Wine Terroirist. Thank you so much, Red Wine Terroirist, for the 10 gifted subs. That is so kind of you. Thank you very much, Red Wine Terroirist. And you know what's coming next? The sound alert, which I have not been able to make happen automatically. But I'm still going to do it. This is for you, Red Wine Terroirist. This is for you.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Thank you very much, Red Wine Terroirist. And yeah, Transgendal, I mean, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no to a sub if you also want to subscribe, Transgendal. But I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to leave it up to you. Thank you very much again, Red Wine TRRS. That was very kind of you. Very, very kind of you. I really appreciate it. If that's you in the picture, does that make your dad Muad'Dib? I don't know. I mean, I guess technically in the timeline of this series, Rob isn't here to pressure anyone into subbing, and I won't stab anyone, even the non-subscribers or the lurkers. I won't stab you. Hard. It won't even break the skin, okay? It's just going to be a little poke with like a butter knife or something like that. Just a little wee stab, that's all. It's not even that big of a deal. I don't even get why people keep asking me about my I won't stab you t-shirt. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to be a little stab, okay? Just a little tiny stab. There's nothing wrong with it. Just the tip. That's right.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Banana Grabber, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you very much, Banana Grabber.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
You are gonna stab a goose?
Thank you, Dimitri, for the 200 friend coin as well. I mean, I think if I was fighting a goose and I had a knife of any kind, that would just make it not fair. That would be just not a fair contest.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I've never actually bought a sub before. I've always just used Prime LOL, but I already used it this month.
Transgender, I really appreciate that. Thank you. The 3 months of tier 1, they're your first ever Twitch sub. I feel so special. I really do. And I think sometimes when I say these things, it sounds disingenuous. Like I hear it coming out of my mouth and I say, I feel so special. And it sounds like I'm being sarcastic.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
It sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not. I promise you. It really does. And I really appreciate it a lot. Thank you. And thank you, Hot Meal, also, for the 8 months of Prime. Thank you, Hot Meal. There we go. This is what now we're talking. Now we're cooking with gas. Here, my second subscription has on first. That's wonderful, Ainsley. Thank you. I think Hassan qualifies as a friend of the stream. Keep your butter knife away from the lurkers. You're scaring them. Listen, threatening to stab your possible supporters is just a proven strategy for pushing subs here on Twitch. It might be controversial, threatening to stab your viewers, okay? But I'm not here to play nice with people. I'm not here to make friends. As much as the friendship triangle, I'm literally here to make friends because of the friendship triangle. So that you might see how that's kind of contradictory. But I'm not here to be nice, okay? And if you don't subscribe to the channel, I will stab you. As a joke. It's just a joke. You should have that Hassan guy on to give him some exposure.
Have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
This show always itches my Marxist bones, Rob. Keep up the good work, smiley face. Are Kira Chat's chatters welcome refugees here? Fun pausers.
Gone wrong. Thank you so much for the 7 months of Prime. I appreciate that, Gone Wrong. Always itches my Marxist bones. Thank you, Gone Wrong. And thank you, Useless, as well, for the 1,000 friend coin. And I welcome all refugees from across Twitch. All refugees are welcome in my society and on this stream as well. Thank you very much. That was very kind of you. 1,000 friend coin from Useless. I really appreciate that. Thank you. You should have that Hassan guy on to give him some exposure. He seems cool. I need to wait till he builds himself up a little bit more, okay? He needs to build himself up a little bit more. Okay, I can't just be giving away the primetime positions on this stream to just anybody, okay? Once Hassan proves that he can build up a little bit more of an audience, he's got a little bit more of it. Like, what's in it for me? That's my question, you know? What's in it for me when we have to have these discussions? So once Hassan is able to build himself up a little bit more, maybe we can talk about that. Okay? Maybe we can talk about doing that. Anyway, I can move on back on to what I was talking about now, but thank you again, everyone, so much. He needs to pull himself up by his bootstraps. Thank you. No free clout. That's exactly right. So let's go back to what I was talking about. Let's go back to what I was talking about, because there's a couple more things that I wanted to get into. Not this. We don't need to look at the worm image anymore. We don't need to look at the worm image. It's okay. But what I wanted to get into is this. While we've spent the afternoon talking about the ways that like the U.S. militarism has like been a primary like driver of U.S. economic dominance around the world, and the long record of brutal human rights violations that have been as the result of U.S. militarism around the world. I think it's interesting to take a look at this vote that just happened in the UN the other day about the Uyghur Muslim issue in China, which many human rights defenders in the West have taken up as this big cause that they need to talk about. Thank you, Gone Wrong. I appreciate that. It's important to get out of Western perspectives, and too few creators do it. So this has been obviously a very hot button topic over the last like couple of years, and a lot of people have been pulled into this discourse. And a lot of people, this has been the central plank. The whole China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims has been a way in for a lot of people across the political spectrum to engage in this kind of like China bad. We talked about the propaganda campaign, right? We looked at that a few minutes ago. Do I still have that? Yeah, I still have it right here. Like you see this, the research showing favorable versus unfavorable views of China around the world, and how that has just completely flipped on its head over the last couple of years, like especially in the last decade. Around 2012, 2013 was still pretty much, China was still pretty much recognized to be a valuable Western ally. I've talked before in the past about how in Canada there was efforts to create kind of like cultural ties between China and Canada. It's talking about figures like Norman Bethune. They made that film with Donald Sutherland about Norman Bethune. But you've seen this huge shift in the United States, all across the West, in opinions about China, and the Uyghur issue and Xinjiang and all this stuff has been a big part of this. So this is kind of an interesting moment. For as much as people in the United States have really tried to push this, it's been a relentless narrative in Western press. You've had people, and this is the disappointing thing, is that you have people like Mike Pompeo, like the former head of the CIA, the former head of the State Department, has been one of the primary people that's been pushing this, and for some reason that doesn't raise red flags with people. And now just yesterday, you had the UN taking a vote to debate on China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims, and was rejected. And this is really a sign, I think, of the kind of shifting polarity and this sort of end of U.S. hegemony. And what we're talking about specifically today is the way that the U.S. and Western countries use human rights as this kind of cudgel, or they weaponize human rights in order to go after countries they don't like. They ignore their own human rights violations. They ignore human rights violations when their allies commit, but they use human rights as this weapon to go after countries like China, which is being done primarily for economic reasons. Just as I was saying, just when it comes to Ukraine, just when it comes to China or Xinjiang or Tibet or Taiwan or any of these different regions of China or Hong Kong, which get targeted, it's not being done for human rights reasons, no matter what the rhetoric is or no matter what the NGOs say. It's been happening for economic reasons. I mean, honestly, as someone living in the West, it's kind of impossible to know. I think this genocide is operated on a similar but far less bloody enactment of Christianity over paganism. I mean, red wine terroirist, the thing that I always point out whenever this comes up is not to say that China is perfect or blameless, or there aren't ever human rights violations, or there hasn't been a crackdown in Xinjiang, but I always compare it to the US-led war on terror, which Canada participated in which, as a result of terrorist attacks against the US, the United States overthrew countries, they invaded countries, they started decades-long wars, they bombed weddings and funerals, they tortured people, they brought people to black sites in Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere to torture them for decades. There's still people in Guantanamo Bay today being held there for multiple decades who have never been convicted of any crime. This was the United States' response to terrorism. And you don't have to agree with China's policy about this. You don't have to. And you can say, yes, it's too much for me. I don't agree with it. It's over the top. They're targeting these ethnic groups. It's a security crackdown. Sure, you can say that. Of course you can. But China's response to terrorism, and there were terrorist attacks in this region, in Xinjiang, that primarily targeted Uyghur Muslims. There were violent incidents of stabbings and attacks in mosques and elsewhere, and riots that were going on. Part of the reason that was going on also is because it borders Afghanistan, and the lawlessness created by the Afghanistan war increased this kind of radicalization there, which led to terrorist attacks. And their response to that, and again, you can agree with it or disagree with it, was to open these, what they called these vocational schools, to focus on education, to put people in these schools, to get them out of this mindset of radicalization or separatism or things that they felt were disrupting their society and getting people killed. You don't have to like that. And I'm not sitting here saying, again, I'm not saying that it's perfect or that it's a perfect solution to terrorism or anything like that. But I think when you take that counterterrorism strategy, which as far as we know has killed no one, like literally not one person, versus the US-led strategy, which killed millions of people and displaced tens of millions of people. 37 million refugees created as a result of the US-led war on terror. Just unfathomable amounts of violence and cruelty. And you take these two policies and hold them up side by side, well, it kind of seems like one is a lot more reasonable and a lot less violent than the other. But for some reason, you have this nonstop lecture, this nonstop finger wagging by people in Canada and the United States about this, criticizing China for their treatment of this ethnic group and for this policy. When you look at the actual, when you look at all the countries in the UN that were supporting this resolution, that wanted to engage in this kind of debate, it's all the same usual suspects. If we put them on a map, you know and I know exactly what that map is going to look like. Counterpoint, it feels like a genocide to me. My emotional instincts work best when it's unimpeded by dialectics. That's true, yeah. It's more of a vibes-based genocide. And this is part of the problem as well. It's because the rhetoric around this is not China is cracking down on this ethnic group. China is violating people's human rights. No, the accusation, which was levied by Mike Pompeo, first and foremost, former head of the CIA, and included in countries like Canada and the United States have jumped on board with this, was genocide. They're committing genocide, right? That's the accusation. Not that they're committing human rights violations. Not that they're engaging in this kind of like increased militarized police or increased security. That's not what the accusations were. It was genocide. Okay? And when you look at the countries that supported this resolution and you look at the ones that voted against it, you know exactly what the map looks like. We don't even have to look at it right now. You know exactly what the map looks like. It's all the Western countries, the former colonizer countries that want to perpetuate this narrative versus the countries in the developing world, many of whom have deals with China that are far better deals than what they get with the West, voting to shut down the discussion. And again, this is just a sign that there is this real shift in power, in global geopolitical power happening right now. And it's very interesting, and very, very interesting that this is going on. And this is a money quote too. It says, "This is a disaster. This is really disappointing," says Dolkan Issa, president of the World Uyghur Congress, whose mother died in a camp and whose two brothers are missing. And the World Uyghur Congress, I mean, you can just look into who has been created and funded this World Uyghur Congress. This people that don't live in this region that are part of this diaspora. They're funded by, arms of Western imperialism like the NED, the intelligence agencies. If they're upset about this is something that we should probably be not so upset about. Yeah, and Adrian Zenz, that's another thing to point out, is all the research that's been done about this. It all goes back to Adrian Zenz, the Victims of Communism Foundation, and the ASPI, which is a Western-backed Australian think tank that's funded by Raytheon and all these arms manufacturers. Like, it's not that hard to figure out what's going on here. But I don't really want to relitigate all this because I've gone into this many times before on the stream about exactly talking about this narrative. But I just wanted to talk specifically about how human rights are weaponized and this UN vote. And I wanted to talk about this as well. Okay. Let me see. Is it here? I called this up earlier. So this is what I mean. Because we could talk about a security crackdown. We could talk about whether there's a human rights violations that are going on at these vocational schools or what's been going on here for the last couple of years. But when you're talking about the crime of genocide, it's a very specific crime. And here's the amazing thing that is going on here, where anyone that criticizes this narrative about the Uyghurs or about Xinjiang is called now a genocide denier. You're a denier of the Uyghur genocide. That's what they say about you if you ask one question about this. But even we looked at last year at the AP, their story about this, and this story in the Washington Post. Look at the way this is framed. As crackdown eases, China's Xinjiang faces long road to rehabilitation. Even as the most visible security measures have been loosened, Uyghurs continue to live under heavier official pressure than in other parts of the country. So even in this so-called genocide that's going on, you even have Western press, agents of Western imperialism, openly admitting that the stuff that they're concerned about is not happening anymore or has been greatly toned down. It's like they're trying to frame it as being this very scary thing. In Xinjiang, we're talking about empty re-education centers loom eerily over the landscape. Operative word, though, empty. They're empty. It's not going on anymore. Maybe there are increased security measures, Maybe there are security checkpoints. Maybe there are human rights violations that are going on. But this is the thing that we're talking about, that we're supposed to be this terrifying genocide that's going on, and anyone that's asking any questions about it gets framed as being a genocide denier. And they're literally openly admitting themselves that these re-education centers that they were so concerned about are literally empty. There's nothing going on there anymore. And I don't want to be a big gray zone defender, okay? I don't want to be a great big gray zone defender. I think they've done some good work when it comes to anti-imperialist journalism. People like Max Blumenthal, I think, has done good advocacy for Palestinian human rights. He's pushed back on Western narratives about imperialism. He's also kind of gone off the fucking deep end lately with anti-vax stuff and kind of openly courting this more reactionary audience, which I don't agree with. And I'm happy, actually, that Benjamin Norden distanced himself from that. I think that was a good thing. But look in the Wikipedia article about this, how the gray zone gets framed as a far-left news website and blog founded and edited by American journalist Max Blumenthal. The website's Wikipedia really does not want you to look at this website. The website's news content is generally considered to be fringe. It is known for misleading reporting and sympathetic coverage of authoritarian regimes, in addition to its denial of human rights abuses against Uyghurs. Okay, and that's actually an edit, because the first time I looked at this article, its denial of the Uyghur genocide. And when you click on this link, human rights abuses against Uyghurs, it brings you to this, the Uyghur genocide. With the same picture, that same picture that we always see every single time this comes up. Every single time, this one picture. You'd think with this widespread genocide that's going on, there would be more than one of these, but no. In every single picture, in every single article about this is what we see. So I would ask people that have kind of bought into this narrative, ask themselves some critical questions about this. Like when you have the Washington Post and the AP openly admitting that these re-education centers or these vocational schools or whatever you want to call them that they were so concerned about are not even active anymore. They're not even active. They're literally, like she's literally framing it, empty re-education centers. But yet, when you ask questions about this or when you push back on this narrative, you are called a genocide denier. Like this, when you're talking about empty re-education centers, that does not seem to me to be any part of a genocidal program. But we have gone over many times, like the reality of this, and you know what I think about it. I retread it for people that are watching today, but this is just part of our discussion, and I'm gonna end soon on this because I don't have much more time to talk. But this is just part of our discussion about the ways in the West that human rights are weaponized against official enemy countries. You know, we hear about human rights in China, whether it's Xinjiang or Tibet or Hong Kong or wherever, or Taiwan. We hear about human rights in Iran. We hear about human rights in Cuba. But this is always used to destabilize these official enemy countries that our ruling class doesn't like. And our own atrocious record of human rights violations. Again, when you're talking about the global war on terror, look at China's anti-terrorism policy versus the United States anti-terrorism policy, and really ask yourself, which country is in the better position to be wagging their finger about the treatment of ethnic minorities? I mean, we talked yesterday about how normalized and accepted Islamophobia was in our discourse and our media discourse and our political discourse for the last 20 years. We're the people that have been taking predominantly Muslim people from around the world and locking them up in places like Guantanamo and torturing them, blowing up hospitals, blowing up weddings, blowing up funerals, overthrowing countries. China has not done this. Whether you agree or disagree with this policy of these vocational schools or re-education or whatever you want to call it, China has not done this. And this is just yet another example of the way that the West takes these complaints about human rights, and NGOs have been a big part about this as well, and they take these concerns about human rights and they weaponize them in order to destabilize countries that they don't like. I just think this like tweet is so amazing. It's really amazing. Empty re-education centers loom eerily over the landscape. Empty re-education centers. This is a place where a supposed genocide is going on. And now anyone that ever asks questions about this or pushes back on this narrative is framed as being a genocide denier who thinks genocide against Muslims is good. This is the same place. Empty re-education centers. And look at all the examples of these human rights violations and security crackdowns that are all based on COVID testing. Sharing a few more photos from a 9-day trip to Kashgar, Hotan, and surrounding areas. Here's a line for COVID testing at a Kashgar hospital. They're really authoritarianly testing people for a potentially deadly disease. They're really authoritarianly, in a very genocide way, trying to prevent an outbreak of a potentially harmful and deadly disease in their culture. And she says again in this tweet, security has eased from a couple years ago, but remains elevated compared to other parts of China. But again, we're not talking about elevated security protocols. We're talking about genocide and mass human rights violations and all these things that people have been breathlessly reporting on now for the last couple of years. Like everywhere else in China. So it's really no different. Zero COVID has become the prevailing concern. When I arrived in late July, Kashgar residents were asked to test twice weekly, but this became more frequent as some part of Xinjiang saw outbreaks. Does this sound like really scary to you folks? They're being asked to test twice weekly. And that became more frequently when there was an outbreak of a potentially deadly disease in their culture. This is the thing that we're supposed to be like, you're a genocide denier if you question this, right? This is the evil authoritarian crackdown on human rights that we're meant to be so scared of. And we can never ever support China. We can never say anything good about China because that means you support human rights violations and it means you support all these terrible things. And it's all about COVID, this thread. COVID contact tracing QR codes have largely replaced ID checkpoints. They look friendlier and keep closer track of movements than checkpoints. Neighborhood monitors who thought I looked like an outsider asked me to go to a nearby shop and scan a QR code, some kinds. Cooking knives are widely chained to counters at restaurants. I went by former reported camps. It wasn't always possible to confirm on the ground, but these sites outside of Kashgar were confirmed to me to be former re-education centers, or vocational schools, or whatever you want to call them, and are now 1, empty, 2, a vocational school that looks empty, and 3, a COVID quarantine center. Empty. And this is a genocide. We were told this is a genocide. And if you ask questions about this, you're called a genocide. You get labeled as being a genocide denier. As people, there's literally weirdos that follow me and under everything that I tweet, even if I tweet about the fucking Mario Brothers movie, are literally calling me a genocide denier and tagging like Ken Klippenstein, being like, you support this guy? You support this guy, this genocide denier? Like, it's fucking ludicrous, folks. While the evidence points, this is pretty rich as well. Excuse me. While the evidence points to the re-education camp system having closed in 2019, many people remain detained through the prison system. Oh my God, they got a prison system there. Can you believe this? Can you believe this, folks? They got a prison system there. By the way, don't look into the prison system in the United States. This one in Hotan is located behind a roadblock in an industrial park. Before the COVID outbreak, Xinjiang was flush with domestic tourists this summer. Kashgar's Id Ka mosque had a fresh coat of paint, and the old city had been spruced up. Terrifying. Really terrifying stuff. Many of these highway checkpoints where you used to have to get out and walk through are no longer being used, but you're still has to drive slowly through past the cameras with your face mask removed. Okay. Again, so folks, I would just ask yourself, if you're someone that is like found yourself being animated by this, and you found yourself being pulled into this narrative, that's when you know the CIA has got their hooks in and the alcoholic operatives want their paycheck. Yeah. This is what you have to ask yourself, though. And I know that there's people that watch this stream sometime. There's people on Twitch from all kinds of channels that have made this like their big cause, right? That they have to talk about. You can never say anything good about China because of this genocide that's going on. You should really ask yourself some critical questions about this. When even the Washington Post is admitting that all this stuff that they've used relentlessly as evidence of this genocide is not even happening anymore. Ask yourself if maybe this is yet another situation when the West has weaponized these kinds of human rights complaints against a country that they don't like for entirely economic reasons. And just as I was saying, to tie it back up with what I was talking about before, just as it is with Ukraine and Russia, it's the exact same thing with Xinjiang or elsewhere in China. The people that are most vocal about this are not vocal because they care about human rights or democracy or sovereignty. This is all being done for economic reasons. And this narrative about China began once it became clear to Western capitalists that China was about to eat their fucking lunch economically and become a global economic powerhouse,
We simply
surpassing the
use the
United
computer
States.
to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Dimitri. What's this Daniel Dundrill post?
The military. Here is what it has decided. The one I spent 31 years in, the military. Here is what it has decided for Afghanistan. And I bet you don't know this either. We're in Afghanistan as we were in Germany post-World War II. That is, for at least a half a century. It has nothing to do with Kabul and state building, nothing to do with fighting the Taliban or proving that we can reconcile with the Taliban, and nothing to do with fighting any terrorist group, because it is the only hard power the United States has that sits proximate to the Central Base Road Initiative of China that runs across Central Asia. If we had to impact that with military power, we are in position to do so in Afghanistan. Second reason we're there is because we're cheek and jowl with the potentially most unstable nuclear stockpile on the face of the earth in Pakistan. We want to be able to leap on that stockpile and stabilize it if necessary. And the third reason we're there is because there are 20 million Uyghurs, and they don't like Han Chinese in Xinjiang province in western China. And if the CIA has to mount an operation using those Uyghurs, as Erdogan has done in Turkey against Assad, there are 20,000 of them in Idlib in Syria right now, for example. That's why the Chinese might be deploying military forces to Syria in the very near future to take care of those Uyghurs that Erdogan invited in. Well, the CIA would want to destabilize China, and that would be the best way to do it, to foment unrest and to join with those Uyghurs in pushing the Han Chinese and Beijing from internal places rather than external.
And yeah, look, you can point out the Ron Paul Institute or things like that. And this is a problem that I've talked about. This is a part that really makes you say, it does, doesn't it, Sin Chow? This is a big problem that I've talked about this week, right? Whether it comes to Russia, Ukraine, or it comes to this stuff. The only people that are making arguments that make sense about this are these fucking deranged libertarians and right-wingers. And liberals are completely on board with endlessly funding fascist militias in Ukraine, endlessly dumping billions of dollars into Ukraine. And anyone that's remotely on the left that makes this argument gets shouted down and called a fucking tanky or a genocide denier. That is a big problem when only these right-wingers are out there making these arguments. Because as things continue, as things progress, like when people can see, especially when it comes to Ukraine, why is Ukraine getting this endless supply of billions of dollars of funds when my life is getting worse? When it's more expensive for me to go get groceries, when it's more expensive for me to put my kids in school, to get childcare, to fill up my tank of gas. My life is getting harder, and meanwhile the US government is just sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine for this war that has nothing to do with me. Why is that? And they turn on the TV to find the answers to that question, and the only people that are giving these answers are people on like Tucker Carlson, people like this guy at the Ron Paul Institute, and all the liberals on CNN and MSNBC are like, no, Russia bad, so we have to continue doing this. This is a big problem. This is going to lead to an increase in the ability of the right to organize around this issue. And no one on the left is able to counter that in the institutional left. And again, especially when it comes to China and Ukraine, a lot of people, even that are like on the left, that identify, I'm like a socialist, I'm on the left, I'm an anti-imperialist, but I support the US government in this case. I support the endless arms transfers to Ukraine, you know? This is how people are getting pulled into this. And this is going to be a huge problem when people look around and they see their declining quality of life, and they look around at what the United States government is doing and who they're supporting, and the only people answering them and giving answers for why that's going on are these fucking deranged right-wingers. That is not going to be a good situation for anybody. I gotta go. I kind of talked more than I intended to here. I wonder if my neighbors in this building listen to me sometimes. They're like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? One day he's talking about geese. Now he's talking about all this kind of crazy tanky stuff. Who's my neighbor here? Sounds like a real sharpshooter. That's right. Thanks for watching this stream, everybody. Once again, it was a good week. It was pretty much the first full week back doing the stream, and I appreciate you all a lot for hanging out with me and watching. Who is this guy? Some leftist called Rob Rousseau. I was looking into this sick individual, and I found this. Last chance for anyone that wants to subscribe to the channel. It's your last chance. I got to go in 5 minutes. One day he's talking about geese. The next he's on about bringing down Western hegemony. It's your very last chance to subscribe to the channel. Don't come to me on Monday. Don't come to me on Monday saying you want to subscribe to the channel. No, I don't want to hear about it. This is now your last chance to subscribe, okay? Don't blow this opportunity.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Last chance TRRS Rob Knife.
Thank you, Useless, for the 200 friend coin. Oh, and look at this.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Carrier Wave. Thank you for the gifted sub.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Gen X Bushy. Thank you so much for the gifted sub as well. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And Chaos the Gardener, thanks for the gifted sub as well. I really got to stop talking now. My voice is just fucking ragged.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you
got
through
another
all
one
this.
there. Jeez. Mordecaj, thanks for the 5 months of tier 1. Thank you, Mordecaj. I appreciate that. Thank you. Raid Bernie. I don't think Bernie needs my help. I don't think Bernie needs my help with this. You know what I will do, though, is raid our friend Dan Simpson again. Dan's been doing a lot of good coverage of this kind of stuff, which I appreciate. So give Dan my regards. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. It was an absolute pleasure to be with you this week. I will be back on Monday, I believe. I should be back on Monday. But I appreciate you all very much. Thank you. You can get in touch on the Discord and join the Discord if you're not in there already. Okay? Join the Discord server. I believe tonight, if I'm not mistaken, tonight is a movie night. Tonight is movie night in the Discord, watching At the Mouth of Madness. Right? I think it is. I'm pretty sure. Here to give my regards. That's right. Happy Turkey Day as well. We got Canadian Thanksgiving coming up. 9 p.m. Eastern tonight in the Discord server. Don't miss it. I don't know if I'm going to be there yet. I don't know. I might be and I might not be. I'll surprise you. Thanks again, folks. I'll talk to you then. All right? Talk to you on Monday. Goodbye.